Chapter 1284. In the mountains 4 li away from Little Yule City, Bai Shuang was leading the 1st Guard Battalion to change. He took out a large amount of commoner clothing from the military luggage and put it on. As he fastened the buttons on his robe, Bai Shuang said to the large man standing beside him, "Commander Zhuang, I'll leave everything outside to you. If nothing goes wrong, I'll send you a signal at night. When the time comes, you must act quickly. Commander Zhuang's full name was Zhuang Qing. He was originally a deputy battalion commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. This time Bai Shuang came to the 1st Army. As a trusted aide, his status naturally rose and he was promoted to Guard Battalion Commander. Zhuang Cheng's face was solemn and his eyes were filled with concern. Hearing this, he immediately stood at attention. "Commander, I'll remember." "Very good, Battalion Commander Xiao, let's go." Bai Shuang had just finished changing his clothes. He glanced at the dozens of men behind him who had also changed their clothes. With a chuckle, he walked towards the nearby official road and headed towards the direction of Little Yule City. Battalion Commander Xiao Qing was originally a company commander of the 4th Regiment. He usually admired Bai Shuang's ability. This time he took the initiative to come along, and obtained the position of Guard Battalion Commander. Bai Shuang and the dozens of men walked on the official road. Little Yule City was already in sight. Bai Shuang couldn't help but slow down and said in a very casual tone, "The enemy has 2,000 soldiers in the city. Are you afraid?" "No." The soldiers all said in unison. To be able to go on a mission with their commander was their honor. If word got out, it would be something to gain face. Furthermore, the other brothers of the 1st Battalion had already changed into the city. They were the last batch. This way they had a total of 400 people. Although they didn't have as many soldiers as the enemy, they still had the ability to fight back. Not to mention, if their commander could lead the troops, he definitely had a thorough plan. What was there to be afraid of? "Good, that's how war is." Very satisfied with the soldiers' answers, Bai Shuang said confidently, "On the battlefield, just because you're afraid of death, you won't be killed. On the contrary, if you weren't afraid of death, others would only be afraid of you. That way you would have more chances to protect yourself. Alright, you are all courageous and insightful people. Next, I will tell you about the next mission. As long as you are courageous and careful, the mission will not be difficult to complete." Back then, White Shuang had infiltrated and taken down Hoboksari City without shedding a drop of blood. For that he had been praised by Yang Chendong. This time he had the same idea. The only difference was that he had changed his approach. This time he was not going to hold anyone hostage. Instead, he was going to give them gifts. This could be seen from the wooden boxes carried by the burly men behind him. Little Yule City. Although it was considered a border city of Ely because it was separated by a heavenly mountain, it was a little remote and not very lively. If it weren't for the chaos of war, where many commoners couldn't even fill their stomachs and were running around, the floating population here would be pitifully small. However, it was precisely because of this chaos that the other soldiers, disguised as refugees, did not encounter any trouble from the city guards when they entered the city. On the other hand, Bai Shuang and his group of several dozen people, dressed in bright clothes and full of vigor, quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. "Who are you people? All of you stop for inspection." The centurion in charge of guarding the city gate had a vigilant look on his face. After all, Bai Shuang's group was too conspicuous. Especially when there was a group of refugees in ragged clothes walking by, it highlighted their different identities. With this shout, Bai Shuang took the lead and stood on the spot. Then he chuckled and said, "Brother, don't be nervous. We are here to find your general and give him a gift." After saying this, Bai Shuang intentionally turned around to look at the 2 large wooden boxes behind him with a smile on his face. Bai Shuang was a person with delicate features. When he took the initiative to express his goodwill, he could indeed give people a good impression. In addition, there were only 30 brothers behind him. This centurion had 100 people beside him. Of course, he wouldn't take it too seriously. Give him a gift. The centurion was puzzled. It wasn't that he had never seen people giving gifts before, but it was his first time seeing someone giving gifts with such fanfare. Just as he was puzzled, Bai Shuang had already walked in front of him. Then he handed 2 silver ingots worth 10 silver taels each to the centurion. "That's right, we are here to give you a gift. I'll have to trouble you to inform the general that he will definitely reward you handsomely." 20 silver taels was not a small sum for a centurion who wasn't rich. His eyes immediately lit up. He used his hand to measure the quality of the silver. It was definitely of high quality. He immediately withdrew his ferocious expression and changed it into a smile. All right, since that's the case, follow me. I will bring you to see the general. It was obvious that this centurion still remembered Bai Shuang's words. The general would definitely reward him handsomely. Such a good job couldn't be given to someone else. With this centurion leading the way, it was naturally not difficult to enter the city. Not only that, they quickly arrived at the general's residence. When Bai Shuang saw that most of the houses in the city were dilapidated, but the residence in front of him was majestic and dignified, how could he not know that they had arrived? As expected, the centurion stopped in his tracks and pointed at the courtyard in front of him. This is the residence of our general, Slam. Please. Thank you, please. Bai Shuang immediately smiled and nodded. He had a look of gratitude as he followed the centurion into the residence. The difference was that Xiao Qing and the others behind him were blocked outside the door. They were watched over by the centurion's soldiers. Could be said that they were being held captive. Bai Shuang didn't show the slightest bit of fear because his subordinates were blocked. On the contrary, he entered with a calm expression. His gaze casually swept around as if he was very interested in everything in the courtyard. However, he knew that he was scouting the enemy. The centurion led the way. He seemed to be very familiar with everything in the residence. Along the way, he didn't let anyone lead him. Even at this time, there wasn't even a housekeeper coming out to welcome him. All of this entered Bai Shuang's eyes and made him feel disdain. From this, it could be seen that the general's standards were too ordinary. The reality was as Bai Shuang expected. Under the centurion's guidance, Bai Shuang easily saw the person in charge, Slam. He was a man with a rather tall and sturdy figure, but his face was a bit pale. Based on his experience in observing people, Bai Shuang could easily tell that this Slam was someone who had been hollowed out by wine and women. This was very consistent with the information sent by the intelligence department. Although Bai Shuang appeared to be very confident along the way, if it wasn't for the fact that he continuously obtained a lot of information about General Yi Bali from the intelligence department while the land was covered in snow, how could he enter so fearlessly? It was only when the preparation work was done that he appeared to be so confident in doing things. According to the information provided by the intelligence department, this Slam was someone who was ostracized by the upper echelons of General Yi Bali, which was why he was arranged to guard such a remote small city. Bai Shuang was very confident that she could establish a relationship with these people who were depressed and unable to achieve their goals. Slam looked as if he had just woken up from a drunken stupor. When he saw that it was a centurion under his command, he yawned and pointed at Bai Shuang, who was standing there, and said, "Who is he? What is he doing here?" With the opportunity to speak, the centurion thought of the reward. He immediately leaned over with a face full of joy. He came to Slam's side and whispered for a while. Originally, Slam didn't seem to care. He thought that it was another homeless person who wanted to join the army. However, in just a short while his eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, before the centurion finished speaking, he had already grabbed his arm and asked with a face full of joy, "You're saying that there are 2 big chests and that there might be silver inside?" The centurion only felt a burst of pain when Slam grabbed his arm, but he had no choice but to nod and answer, "Yes, General. I haven't seen what's inside the chests, but I think it's silver without a doubt." Good, then why aren't you bringing it up?" As Slam, who was sent to a remote place, even if he wanted to deduct some silver and receive some benefits, he had nowhere to go. Recently there were more and more refugees. For a time there were all kinds of people. There were even many bandits passing by. As a result, the security of Little Yule City wasn't very good. Every day there were all kinds of bad news and he was already sick of it. Now that he heard that someone was actually giving him silver, how could he not be happy? In his excitement he couldn't help but forget himself. The centurion also wanted to see if the chests were filled with silver, but Bai Shuang was still standing there and didn't speak. He looked down on the general's ugly expression and could only remind him softly, "General, the person is here. Shouldn't we first ask him why he's here?" Is he had to ask first. That who's the person below? With this reminder, Slamu finally reacted. Then he tidied up his clothes and asked in a very serious manner. Finally it was his turn. Bai Shuang had already prepared his speech. "General, my surname is Bai and I'm in the grain business. You also know that in the chaos of war the price of grain is rising again and again. Therefore I gave up all my wealth and opened a trade route from the grasslands. As long as the general agrees, we can continuously transport grain from the north of Tianshan Mountain. At that time we will have to pass through the general's territory. Therefore this time I'm here to give the general a gift and hope that we can work together to achieve great things. What? You're in the grain business? You can transport grain from the north of the mountain? You're Han? At this moment, Slam's eyes were already wide open. He was completely shocked by Bai Shuang's words. Chapter 1285. If one were to talk about what was the most valuable right now, the first would be food. After all, people could buy less clothes and even a piece of clothing could be worn for a long time with some mending. However, they could not go without food for a day. Otherwise there would be problems and even death. Especially in this war, the price of food had increased exponentially. Even though Si Zhimu had already received orders to stock up on food, he still felt that the granary in the city was too small. After all, no one knew how long this war would last. There was only going out and not going in. It was truly worrying. And now, someone said that they could get a large amount of food. How could he not be alarmed? The first thing he did was to ask if the other party was Han. After all, only the Han-led 5-star army would not lack food. That was why they had such a way to transport food. Regarding his identity as Han, Bai Shuang had no intention of hiding it. He did not want to hide it either. Facing Si Zhimu's question, he did not have any intention of denying it. He immediately nodded. General has good eyesight. This one is Han. With this admission, Si Zhimu's body tensed up. Their opponent, the 5-star army, was mainly Han. However, Bai Shuang's next sentence caused Slamu's tense nerves to relax a lot. I'm a Han Chinese, but not all Han Chinese are part of the 5-star army. Not all Han Chinese like to fight and are willing to fight. This one only likes to earn money. I do not understand military matters and do not want to understand. Hearing Bai Shuang say that he was not part of the 5-star army and did not like to fight. He only liked to earn money, Si Zhimu's expression became much better. The centurion to the side was also shocked by Bai Shuang's identity as a Han. He was not afraid that the other party would do anything to him. After all, this was Little Yule City, his territory. He was worried that the reward he was about to receive would be gone. Now that he heard such words, his heart moved. He quickly said to Si Zhimu, General, what he said makes sense. Not all Han people are our enemies. Besides, if he really is an enemy, why would he give you money? I'm afraid that he would have long come over with weapons. That makes sense. Living in a remote area, Sama didn't know much about the 5-star army, so he didn't think the 5-star army was that scary. The most important thing was that he also believed that this was Little Yule City and this was his territory. There were only a few dozen people here, but he had 2,000 soldiers. If the other party dared to act rashly, he only needed to give an order to settle everything. Furthermore, he knew that if he were White Double, he definitely wouldn't have the guts to barge into the 5-star army's barracks. Judging others by his own standards, Sama's vigilance dropped a lot. When he looked at White Shuang, he focused all his attention on the grain business. What did you say your surname was? General, he said his surname is Bai, the centurion said with a flattering look. Oh yes, Mr. Bai, right? You said that you can transport food, then may I ask where the food is? Slamu resumed his high and mighty general appearance and asked Bai Shuang. He. Seeing the other party ask such an idiotic question, Bai Shuang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then he felt that the situation wasn't right. Seeing Slamu's confused expression, he took the initiative to explain. General, this time I'm only the vanguard. I'm in charge of clearing all the checkpoints. Also, we're not very sure if there's a need for food here. Only after understanding everything will the food be transported here in large quantities. With this explanation, Slamu's old face turned red. He also knew that he seemed to have asked a very stupid question. But right now his attention wasn't on this at all. He was thinking about large quantities of food. When White Shuang finished speaking, he immediately said, Lack of food. I'll take as much as you have, but I don't know the price. The price is only 30% higher than the market price. White Shuang hesitated for a moment, then tentatively raised 3 fingers. 30%. Hearing this price, Slama seemed to have been pricked by something. With a whoosh, he bounced up from the chair. What? 30% is a lot? That won't do. 20% is fine. White Shuang looked very careful, showing his worry and nervousness. No, it's not much. 30% is already very good. The laughing Slamu had already walked over from the chair and came to White Shuang's side. He was very clear that in Ely food was priceless. Anyone who had some skills and some strength would be hoarding food. They were afraid that if there was a war there would be no food to eat. Who would be willing to sell food? Not to mention 30%, even if it was doubled or even tripled they would still easily sell it. Thinking about it this way, this was definitely a big deal. White Shuang had undoubtedly become a noble person in his eyes. He immediately came to White Shuang's side with a face full of smiles. His eyes were filled with indescribable passion. Because he was too passionate, White Shuang couldn't help but take a step back. General, don't lie to me. Is 30% really no problem? White Shuang's eyes moved as he spoke, showing his shrewd side on his face. Of course there's no problem. I'll take as much as you send, ha. Slamu laughed loudly. He originally thought that after being sent to this remote little city, it would be difficult for him to achieve anything in his life. He didn't think that a good thing would fall into his lap. How could he not grasp it? At this moment White Shuang's heart finally settled. The business was more or less done. Next, White Shuang brought up the 2 boxes of silver he had prepared. At this moment Slamu was shocked to the point of choking. He had a new understanding of White Shuang's wealth and no longer doubted it. After all, if he didn't have a request, why would he give him so many benefits first? Regardless of whether there was food or not, just based on these 2 boxes of silver, it was not a loss to make this friend. The things that should be set up were done. Everything that followed was much easier. Bringing White Shuang and the others to the residence, a banquet was set up. Under White Shuang's request, all the officers with some authority in the city were invited to the residence. At the banquet that night, Slamu even put his arm around White Shuang's shoulder in front of everyone and introduced him as his brother. In the future everyone should give him face and so on. When the other generals saw this situation, how could they not know what to do? One by one they took the initiative to come to White Shuang's side to toast him, wanting to get familiar with him. White Shuang's alcohol tolerance was not bad. He didn't refuse anyone and led his brothers to drink with everyone. This drinking lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, most of the generals in the courtyard had collapsed to the ground. White Shuang, who was also 40% drunk, shook his head. He didn't forget his mission. Looking at the battalion commander Xiaoqing, who hadn't drunk, he said, "Go, this is Slamu's military seal. Take it and let your brothers into the city. Gather the other soldiers in the city and watch over them." "Yes," Xiaoqing said with a face full of excitement. At this moment he was completely convinced by the military chief. He had only used 2 chests of silver to take down the entire Little Yule city without shedding a drop of blood. Most importantly, he had completely sealed off the news of the army entering the city. This was a true wise man, a true expert. Xiaoqing left. Using the commander's seal, he quickly found Commander Zhuang Qing, who was waiting for news outside the city. What happened next was much simpler. The 5-star division quietly entered the city. Following that, they gathered all the guards inside. After that, they removed their weapons and became prisoners of war. All of this was completed before daybreak. Then the signal was sent out. An extremely bright flash grenade soared into the sky. 3 li away, 2 high, and the others who were waiting for news immediately brought over 30,000 soldiers towards Little Yule city. The sky finally brightened. Slamu, who was in a daze, was awoken by the urge to urinate. When he slowly opened his eyes, he didn't have the urge to urinate anymore. This was because at this moment, a steel blade was placed on his neck. Surrounding him was a group of 5-star army soldiers wearing military green uniforms. This is a dream. This must be a dream. Slamu hurriedly closed his eyes. Then he opened them again. However, nothing had changed. There was only a fierce gaze in Commander Xiaoqing's eyes. "General, see, you're finally awake? Then let's have a good talk now." "Talk about what?" Slamu's voice was trembling as he spoke. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the 5-star army would appear in front of him. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the enemy would leap over the mountains. Because perhaps people and horses could leap over, but what about the army's rations? How could he know that White Shuang didn't bring any rations over? He only had the soldiers carry rations for 5 days. This was because he believed that as long as they came here, there would naturally be people who would give them rations. White Shuang, who had already grasped the situation, suddenly had a fierce look in his eyes. He knew that he should show Slamu some power. Otherwise, he was afraid that this person wouldn't cooperate with him. Now that he had occupied the capital of Little Yule, there were 2 ways to enter the deeper regions of Ili Belly. The first was to head south to the capital of Big Yule. From there he would enter the Tex River, and then to the north would be the Katimian Mountains, which would be to the south of the capital of Ili Belly. The other was to head north, through the 3 cities of Nalatu, Talhalla and Kongisi, and across the Kongisi River he would reach the capital of Ili Belly. Comparatively speaking, the latter path was more difficult to advance. However, the strength of the enemy would also be heavier. This was more in line with Yang Qindong's military plans. However, he didn't make the final choice. Everything would depend on the result of his discussion with Slamu. He believed that this person would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. Chapter 1286. Facing Bai Shuang's murderous gaze, Slamu's heart trembled. He had thought of something and his thoughts came true. He heard Bai Shuang say coldly, "I can tell you now that I'm not a merchant. We're the 5-star army. We've crossed Tianshan Mountain to come here. This time we're here to take your king's dog life. Trust me, it won't be long before this place becomes the territory of our 5-star army. All the soldiers here who oppose us will be killed or become captives who will never see the light of day. You're very lucky to be caught by us first. Now you're still useful. As long as you're willing to cooperate with us, I promise you'll live a good life. Of course, you can choose not to cooperate. However, I know you, but the blade in my hand doesn't. Please make your choice." As he spoke, he intentionally waved the blade in his hand. The sharp blade flashed in front of Slamu, scaring him out of his wits. Speaking of which, no one wasn't afraid of death. Especially Slamu, who was used to being a general. He could treat other people's lives like grass, but he couldn't do that to himself. In addition, he had been marginalized for many years. He had a lot of complaints against the upper echelons, so he wasn't loyal at all. Now, in order to survive, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He already had the thought of surrendering, but he still wanted to fight for more benefits. After Slamu's eyes looked around, he looked at Bai Shuang, who was waiting for an answer, and said, "How can I believe you? How can the glory and wealth you speak of be fulfilled?" Even at this time, Slamu was still thinking about how to obtain more benefits for himself. In the eyes of these people, there was no such thing as a nation, a country, or dignity. They only cared about their own benefits. If these people were in the 5-star army, needless to say, once they were discovered, they wouldn't be put in an important position. They might even be kicked out of the army at any time and sent to be punished. Bai Shuang looked down on these people. His tone wasn't polite. "Slamu, you're now our prisoner. Do you think you still have the right to talk about conditions? You can only choose to believe us now. Otherwise, we'll cut you in half right now and hang you on the city wall to let you have a taste of the wind and rain." "No, I'll cooperate with you. I'll completely cooperate with you. I just hope you keep your promise." When Slamu heard these ruthless words and saw Bai Shuang's unfriendly gaze, he immediately replied with a face full of fear. Bai Shuang was very satisfied with just a scare, and Slamu was convinced. In order to make the other party cooperate with him better, White Shuang also intentionally retracted his killing intent, and a smile appeared on his face. "That's the way, right? Don't worry, our 5-star army are very friendly to our friends. You can also go and scare them a little. As long as our 5-star army occupies a place, most of the local generals will be responsible for the security work. If your performance is satisfactory, not only will you receive a large amount of rewards, you might even have the chance to become the general of this area in the future." Good. Hearing that if he did his job well, he would even have a higher position, Slamu's eyes revealed a look of yearning. He immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Very quickly he told White Double Ears everything he knew, including the military arrangements of the nearby cities and the situation of the military forces. Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already waiting in the hall. When Bai Shuang brought Slamu in front of them, the attitude of the 4 was clearly much more respectful than before. They had already heard about what had happened. Bai Shuang was the commander of an army and his status was extremely noble. However, he had still entered the tiger's den, daring to bring a few dozen people into Little Yule City. Then, without harming a single brother, he had taken control of the situation here. Just based on this, it wasn't something the 4 division commanders could do. They might be able to take down Little Yule City with a small price, but they definitely couldn't do it as quietly as Bai Shuang. The most important thing was that the news of them appearing here wasn't leaked. This gave them more time to prepare and choose, creating better conditions for the next attack. After Bai Shuang entered the hall, he noticed the attitude of the 4 division commanders. They were clearly more respectful. This made him very satisfied. He didn't expect these people to immediately submit to him, but as long as they didn't hinder him, he believed that his performance in the future would make them truly submit. You're all here. Let me introduce you. This is General Slamu. He is now our friend and is willing to provide us with everything we need to know. He is also willing to cooperate with us. Now let's ask him to explain the surrounding situation. Bai Shuang smiled and nodded at Slamu. He had already heard it once. Now that he had Slamu explain it again, it wasn't that Bai Shuang's memory was bad. On the contrary, he was very smart. The reason why he did this, other than letting the 4 division commanders understand the situation, he also wanted to test Slamu again and see if he introduced the same thing twice. Once he found a problem, he would properly explain it. Fortunately, Slamu really surrendered at this moment, so what he said was naturally true. 2 introductions, the language might be reversed, but the meaning didn't change. Bai Shuang finally relaxed. He looked at the 4 division commanders and said, "Now that everyone understands the situation, let's talk about what you all think." The East Army's new 5th Army. After speeding up their march all the way to Lopner River, they went straight to Lop City in the southwest direction. Under the lead of Shi Wanshan, they advanced at a speed of a few hundred li per day. What they wanted was to take the enemy by surprise. They wanted to directly attack the enemy. According to Yang Qindong's request, they moved unhindered in the Yarqiang Kingdom, so that they didn't have time and energy to deal with the Turpan Kingdom. The 5-star army's main force would be able to take over the Turpan Kingdom. The new army also bypassed Khaleesi City and came to the Iron Gate Pass behind it, cutting off the retreat of the Turpan Kingdom's army, making it a completely isolated city. It also forced Harden Barter to send reinforcements. The strategy of encircling and attacking reinforcements has been formed. In the Turpan Kingdom, when all kinds of information were gathered through the radio, Yang Qindong was naturally very satisfied after reading it. It can be said that the performance of the 3 armies was better than he expected. They didn't care about the gains and losses of a city and only wanted to destroy the enemy's strength. This kind of strategic thinking was very advanced. He believed that when the enemy reacted, it would be too late for them to regret it. For now, let these 3 monkeys continue to cause trouble. When the time is right, it will be time for him to lead the army to battle. At this time, Yang Qindong's mood was very good. Beta Persei noticed this and hurriedly came over. "Young master, you also have to take care of your body. Don't always be like this. If you have work, you can give it to others." Knowing that Beta Persei was concerned about him, Yang Qindong had a smile on his face. How could he not want to rest? But anyone who wanted to achieve such a big goal in a short period of time would have no time to rest. How is Division Commander Tian and Division Commander Ling doing? The 2 people he was talking about were the Division Commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the Division Commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang. After the liberation, they received the order to liberate the Fire Province, Willow City, and other places around Turpan. As the capital of Turpan, there were many large cities and strategic towns around Turpan. It was just that because of the geographical location, they couldn't provide much protection. When Harden Barter escaped, he didn't escape to those places, causing them to become isolated cities. For the safety of the rear, Yang Qindong decided to liberate these cities. Only then could he walk out of Turpan without any worries. When it came to the situation of these cities, Beta Persei's face immediately showed an excited expression. "Young master, everything is going well. The Fire Province has been taken." "So fast?" Hearing that the Fire Province had been captured, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with surprise. "Tell me the details." "Yes. We first sent people to the Fire Province to persuade them to surrender, but the effect was not good. Although they didn't kill people because of the strength of our 5-star army, they threw the emissary out of the city, which angered the 2 division commanders. They divided the work, and the 4th Division blasted open the west gate of the Fire Province city with a few cannons. Then Division Commander Tian who led the brave cavalry into the city. What followed was naturally a one-sided situation. The Fire Province city was broken in less than half a day. Most of the 20,000 Turpan soldiers guarding the city surrendered and a few were killed. Now the 2 division commanders are using the same method to go to Xianxia city. The news just came and it seems that the problem can be solved peacefully. When talking about this, Beta Persei's face was full of joy. Clearly this person was a warmonger in his bones. Yang Qindong was also very satisfied after hearing this. Yes, that's right. If we don't attack then it's fine. If we move then it's like a bolt of lightning. Don't give them a chance to fight back. Of course, if we can solve the problem without using a single soldier, then that's naturally the best. Yes, I'll immediately send someone to pass on the young master's order. Beta Persei knew that Yang Qindong was a person who loved his soldiers like his children. This was also because he didn't want to make too many sacrifices, so he immediately nodded. Then seeing that Yang Qindong was indeed in a good mood, he tried to suggest, "Young master, today's official business is not so busy. Why don't we take a walk on the street? You don't know, but Turpan City is very lively right now." Chapter 1287. Yang Qindong was right about this. Ever since this place was occupied by the 5-star army, especially after the previous siege of Turpan, the hearts of the people here had all fallen to the 5-star army's side. In addition, this was a big city in the front line of the battle, so it naturally became the first choice of the fleeing people of the 3 kingdoms. They had already made sufficient preparations and there was enough food in the city. There were nearly 100 big and small grain stores, which greatly solved the problem of food for the people. More and more people stayed here, so it was naturally very lively. Yang Qindong sat in the palace every day. Even if he did not step out of the palace, he could still understand a lot of things through the radio. This made it difficult for him to have any leisure time. Now that the military affairs were going smoothly, he could take a walk on the streets to understand the actual situation. If he discovered some practical problems, he would not have to work and rest. After thinking about it, he did not leave the palace for a long time, so he nodded. Okay, then go and make the arrangements. Remember, don't bring too many guards. Don't disturb the security of the city. Since he said not to bring too many guards, Beta Persei did not dare to be negligent. As the core of Xianxia and the soul of the 5-star army, his safety had always been the most important. After Beta Persei got Yang Qindong's approval, he quickly went out and called the Longwei's first captain, Qiu Vi, over. Then a team of 50 Longwei elites changed into casual clothes and prepared. This was only what could be seen. There were still 200 Longwei members who would follow outside. Once they found any problems, they would immediately appear and provide support. Yang Qindong also changed into a green robe and led Beta Persei, Qiu Vi and the others out of the palace to the streets. At this time, Turpan City was indeed as Beta Persei had said. The streets were crowded with people and it was a lively scene. On both sides of the road, there were countless shops of all kinds. Everything related to food, clothing, housing and transportation was not lacking. These were all operated by the people of other races who had migrated here. Their arrival made the city even more lively and prosperous, filled with people. Occasionally, people in ragged clothes could be seen on the streets. They were all people who had fled from Turpan, Yarqiang and Ili. Every time they saw them, they could see the surprise and caution in their eyes. They were surprised by the prosperity of Turpan City, and careful that their identity and clothes seemed to be somewhat out of place here. As the group walked, Beta Persei introduced what he had learned to Yang Qindong. "Young master, these people will generally be observed for 2 days after entering the city. First, let them feel the prosperity of our Xianxia land. This will make them more confident in their future life and make them more prepared to integrate here in the future. Second, it will also make it easier for our soldiers to observe them. If there are spies from the 3 kingdoms among them, they will often give themselves away and it will be easier for us to screen them. Of course, after 2 days, those who have no problems will be invited to the shelter in the city to register. Then they will be transported to the beginning city by the vehicles transporting supplies. There they will report to the logistics headquarters of Yangxi for resettlement and distribution." Yang Qindong listened silently and nodded from time to time. He doesn't pay too much attention to these things now. With Xianxia on the right track, he only needs to make decisions on some important matters. These matters will naturally be handled by specialized personnel. Sometimes when they report the results, he may not even check them. Not bad, this is a good way to deal with it. The governor of the Far Eastern state, Qinbo, sent a telegram a while ago, saying that there is a large amount of newly opened land that no one is planting. Moreover, the land there is very fertile. It is really too wasteful. Now that we need manpower, we can consider letting Yangxi send more people over. Listening to Yang Qindong's instructions, Beta Persei of course agreed and kept it in mind. At this time he was not only the captain of Yang Qindong's guards, but also the butler, secretary, assistant and other positions. Can be said that he has a high position and power, but he is also very busy. While they were talking, the road in front suddenly became very crowded. Looking from a distance, they could see that many people were gathered there, and it seemed that there were a lot of people. On the periphery, many 5th Star Army soldiers in military green uniforms were maintaining law and order. What's going on? With so many people crowded here, Yang Qindong asked with a slight frown. Go and ask around. Beta Persei didn't often go out of the palace, so he naturally didn't know. He ordered Qiuvi beside him. Very quickly, the 2 quick-witted dragon guards rushed forward and returned after a short while. Because they were on the street, they didn't salute Yang Qindong. Instead, they cupped their hands and said, "Sixth young master, the female soldiers in the propaganda office are setting up a stage to perform a show. There are many people watching nearby." The propaganda office. Hearing this, Yang Qindong was also interested. He laughed and said with great interest, "Then let's go and take a look." "Okay, I'll arrange it." Beta Persei quickly agreed. Of course, he wouldn't let the young master and the people crowded together to watch the show. If that happened, safety would be a big problem. Immediately, he sent out a few people to look for a spot nearby. He had heard that as long as there was a performance, there would be good observation points in the nearby restaurants. Usually, these places would be occupied by the soldiers of the 5-Star Army in advance to prevent people from causing trouble and causing problems in terms of safety. Not long after the Long Wei left, they came back to report that they had found the 3rd floor of a restaurant. The location was excellent and the view was excellent. The 5th Star Army soldiers who were responsible for observing there had already withdrawn. They were only waiting for Yang Qindong to go. "Let's go." Yang Qindong also knew that with his current status, it was really not suitable for him to mingle with the people. At least, it was not possible in Turpan City, where the situation was not completely stable. So he nodded and let the Long Wei lead him to a nearby restaurant. The 3rd floor was high and looked down from above. It was the big stage of the propaganda office. From here he could overlook everything. There were originally a few tables on the 3rd floor, but they were completely empty at this moment. The table with the best view had a fruit plate placed on it. Yang Qindong naturally sat at the head of the table. He looked around and saw that the soldiers of the propaganda office were performing. There were many female soldiers among them, and all of them were young and beautiful. Their presence made the show even more attractive. Not long after Yang Qindong sat down, footsteps came from the stairs of the 3rd floor, followed by soft greetings. Yang Qindong's ears were extraordinary, so he naturally heard it clearly. Everyone was calling the 8th vice-captain. Needless to say, it must be Ba Daojiang, the vice-captain of the Long Wei 1st Brigade. It was Ba Daojiang. He was off duty today. He had just heard that Yang Qindong came out of the palace and came to the street, so he quickly rushed over. As soon as he entered the 3rd floor and saw Yang Qindong sitting there, he immediately gave a standard military salute. "Okay, you're not wearing your military uniform, so there's no need to salute." Yang Qindong looked at Ba Daojiang with a satisfied gaze and nodded gently. Although Ba Daojiang was not the first person to follow Yang Qindong, he was an old man who had been here before the origin city was built. He had always been good and was responsible for Yang Qindong's safety. He had never neglected his duties. Yang Qindong's attitude towards such a person was naturally much more casual. Yang Qindong's tone was so casual. When Captain Qiuvi heard it, he chuckled and then took the opportunity to tease him. "What's wrong, Vice-Captain? You're here to escort the publicity department when you're on vacation. This is almost your second home. Is something good going to happen soon?" The burly Ba Daojiang suddenly blushed at this time, which was rare for him. He threw a look at Qiuvi, telling him to shut up. Although Ba Daojiang was the vice captain, he had a very good relationship with Captain Qiu Vi. The two of them had gone through countless dangers and life and death situations together. Their relationship was not any worse than that of brothers. It was precisely because of this that some of his words could be said to be heard clearly by Qiu Vi. That was why he could make fun of him. Hearing this, Beta Persei and the Long Wei could not help but laugh. Only Yang Chendong looked confused. What are you talking about? When Yang Chendong asked, the people below naturally did not dare to not answer. Beta Persei then whispered in front of him, Young master, the situation is like this. Ba Daojiang has fallen in love with the publicity department's director, Shui Qing. At this time he is stepping up his attack on the city. Yang Chendong, who heard the news, nodded as if he suddenly realized something. He was really too busy, so he naturally did not pay too much attention to the matters of the soldiers around him. However, Yang Chendong knew about Shui Qing. She was considered an old member of the publicity department and was also one of the subordinates that the 6th Madame Luan Xiaoyu valued. He had some impression of this person. After being exposed, Ba Daojiang's face turned even redder. At this moment he lowered his head, losing his usual vigor. Seeing this, Yang Chendong laughed. Men should get married when they are of age. What's there to be embarrassed about? I just don't know how your progress is. Don't embarrass Long Wei. Even Yang Chendong began to make fun of him. The Long Wei could not help but laugh. Ba Daojiang, whose face was even redder, stretched his neck and said, 6th young master, Shui Qing has a good impression of me, but she said that she is too busy with work now, so she wants to wait a while before discussing the marriage. Obviously, Ba Daojiang was afraid that others would look down on him, so he directly admitted it. Then there's no problem. Not bad. Hearing this answer, Yang Chendong knew that this was a matter of mutual consent. He thought that since he had nothing to do, he might as well be the matchmaker for another month. He nodded slowly and said, We have always been very busy with work and will only get busier in the future. How can we have time to rest? How about this, you call Shui Qing over? I will ask her. If there is no problem with her, I will make the decision for your marriage. Chapter 1288. Yang Chendong knew that there would be a huge war coming up and there would be no time left. Ba Daojiang wasn't young anymore. He might as well take this opportunity to settle the matter. It would be a good thing to fulfill someone's wish. The 6th young master was going to be the witness. Ba Daojiang grinned from ear to ear. Qiu Vi, who was standing at the side, saw that his deputy only knew how to smile and didn't do anything. He couldn't help but kick him. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite Miss Shui Qing over. I'll go right away. Ba Daojiang, who had regained his senses, immediately agreed. He then turned around and disappeared from the 3rd floor. Seeing how anxious he was, the Long Wei crowd burst into laughter. In less than an instance's time, Ba Daojiang dragged the panting Shui Qing to the 3rd floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Chendong. Shui Qing was originally organizing a performance downstairs. Previously, she was the publicity director of the Origin City region. Now, she was promoted to the publicity director of the entire grassland region. There were many things that she needed to do every day. When Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared by her side, she was both happy and surprised. When Ba Daojiang first appeared by her side and expressed his desire to pursue her, Shui Qing also fell in love with this honest man. Later on, because of work, the two of them spent more time apart than together. However, this didn't dilute their feelings for each other. Instead, it made them feel like they were newlyweds every time they met. Later on, when the two of them were talking about marriage, Ba Daojiang even said that he would find a chance to report this matter to the 6th young master and invite him to be the witness. Regarding this matter, Shui Qing only listened to it for a while. What kind of person was the 6th young master? How many things did he have to do every day? How would he have the time to deal with these small matters? Although Ba Daojiang was the vice captain of the Black Cavalry 1st Platoon and could be considered one of Yang Chendong's men, she didn't have any illusions. She didn't expect that Ba Daojiang would suddenly appear just now. Shui Qing thought that he missed her again. Just when she was overjoyed, but because she was too busy with work, Ba Daojiang suddenly grabbed her hand. Then the two of them ran out in front of all the people backstage of the publicity department. Although Shui Qing had long acknowledged her relationship with Ba Daojiang and thought that she was his woman for the rest of her life. However, the wedding banquet had not been held yet, and the two of them were still scrupulously abiding by their identities. They had never had any physical intimacy. Now that her hand was grabbed in front of everyone, she blushed. When she finally reacted, her expression became even better. At the same time, she blamed Ba Daojiang and asked him to let go of her hand and let her go. Alright, let's not worry about other things at this time. The sixth young master is waiting for us upstairs. Let's go. Ba Daojiang knew what Xueqing was thinking. Women were always shy. However, he really didn't have time to wait. Who knew if there would be some urgent matter that would call the sixth young master back? If that was the case, he would miss a great opportunity. Just now, the platoon leader took the opportunity to tell the sixth young master about him. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Holding Xueqing's hand, he jogged all the way to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Chendong. When she saw Yang Chendong with her own eyes, Xueqing's heart, which was already racing from jogging all the way, started to beat even faster. The current Yang Chendong was like a god in the eyes of the Xianxia people in the five-star army. Especially after the publicity department had been instructed to deliberately create a cult of personality, his reputation had spread at a rapid pace. As the most important middle-level cadre in the publicity department, Xueqing naturally regarded Yang Chendong as a god. Now that she was able to get close to the god in her heart, Xueqing was very excited. You must be Xueqing. Not bad. He looked at Xueqing and found that this girl had a great temperament. Especially when she was wearing the lieutenant colonel uniform, it made her look even more valiant and full of an indescribable heroic spirit. This girl was quite compatible with a burly man like Ba Daojiang. A single word of praise made Xueqing's face blossom into a smile, like a lotus flower emerging from the water. Her face carried a brilliant yet somewhat bashful smile. Thank you for the king's praise. With Xueqing's status, she could only call Yang Chendong king. She couldn't casually call him king. No problem, Director Xueqing. You can call me sixth young master like Ba Daojiang. Yang Chendong smiled and said with a warm voice. In order to make Xueqing feel less restrained, Yang Chendong smiled and asked about work. He knew that when interacting with people he had to start with the areas that they were most familiar with. This way he could quickly eliminate the barriers between them. As expected, when it came to reporting work, Xueqing became less shy and more shrewd and capable. Yes, sixth young master. Under the guidance of Logistics Commander Yang, our publicity department just carried out an expansion of recruitment. To be honest, there are many girls who are good at singing and dancing in the grasslands. We went through a serious selection process. After the political investigation department participated in the selection process, we recruited a total of 1,200 new members. Now they have been divided into 12 publicity teams and have begun to perform in various places. The performance team on the streets of Turpan City today is one of them. They are currently performing the defense of Turpan City not long ago. We used the Turpan brothers, Tumu, as the model and added some exaggerated techniques to create this performance. Listening to Xueqing's report, Yang Chendong was also interested. He knew about Tumu. This person was a local of Turpan City. At first he wanted to earn money, so he joined the defense of Turpan City. Later on he fully displayed his ability to fight on the battlefield. Now he was already a company commander of 100 soldiers. Although his position wasn't very high as a local of Turpan, he could be a representative and a model to promote. More often than not, the more grassroots people would resonate with them. It could be said that this was a very good example. Yes, I know about Tumu. You chose him as the model, so your train of thought is correct. Then tell me, how are the results? Yang Chendong wanted to know what kind of changes the performance of the publicity team could bring to the overall situation. After all, if the performance was only for the sake of completing the mission, but there were no results, then the performance would lose its true meaning. At this moment, Xueqing's face revealed a confident expression. Sixth young master, the results are very good. With Tumu as the model, the recruitment office has already sent a notice. Now there are many people who have signed up. They are already too busy. Oh? Not bad, not bad. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the results. To be able to recruit more soldiers from the local area was naturally something that he was happy to see. They were familiar with the local situation and had long adapted to the local climate. With them, the combat troops could take fewer detours. Listening to Yang Chendong's praise, Xueqing's face was even sweeter than eating honey, and her small face was bright red. Seeing that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Beta Persei also thought of some things he had heard before. He decided to put in more effort and put in some good words for Xueqing. When he was pursuing Kikage, this director Xueqing helped him a lot. He would not forget this favor. Young master, I heard that since the performance of the publicity team, the people have a better understanding of our army and some of our policies, so the voices and emotions against us have decreased a lot. There's such a thing. Listening to Beta Persei's further explanation, Yang Qindong laughed out loud. Very good. This is the change brought to people's lives and work by literature and art. Well, I hope the publicity department will continue to expand the performance team. I think 10 teams are a bit too few. I'll talk to Yangxi later, it should be expanded. 100 is not a lot. Since Yang Qindong said so, Xueqing immediately agreed happily and kept nodding. She would not forget that when she wanted to expand the publicity department she had to persuade Yangxi for a long time. If she did not have the backing of the 6th Madame Luan Xiaoyu, she was afraid that the expansion of these 10 teams would not be supported. But now it was different. With Yang Qindong's endorsement, it would be much easier to go to the logistics headquarters to ask for people and money. Even the 6th young master was so supportive of their work and praised their work. Who would dare to neglect it? Who would not listen to the 6th young master's words? This meeting was a happy one for everyone. After all, Yang Qindong had too many things to do. He stayed in the restaurant for a while and watched the performance below. He saw that there were more and more people gathering around, and they all revealed looks of curiosity, especially some young people. No matter if they were men or women, they all revealed looks of yearning. Yang Qindong knew that the performance of the publicity team could continue to be carried out in order to win more people's hearts and gain more people's support. Speaking of publicity teams, it was very difficult for the people to see them in the past. Occasionally, some vaudeville troupes could perform on the streets. There was no Peking opera in that era. And where could they find so many handsome men and beautiful women in such troupes? Where could they find such good and diverse education and story themes? The publicity team was a pioneer. As soon as they appeared, they attracted everyone's attention. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they liked them very much. It was precisely because they liked him that they were willing to learn more about him. Then they would know more about the 5-star army in Yangxi. This kind of publicity could often achieve something that even 1,000,000 soldiers couldn't do. When Yang Qindong brought people to watch the performance on the streets and did not return, the 1st Cavalry Division had already taken down Yanghe City and was cleaning up the battlefield. Chapter 1289. The newly appointed commander of the 4th Regiment, Su Kuda, looked at the corpses of the Turpan soldiers strewn about in front of him and felt a wave of dizziness. If his memory served him right, the battle had only lasted for an hour, but the 7,000 Turpan soldiers in the city had been utterly defeated. Just the 4th Regiment that he led had killed over 400 of the enemy, capturing close to 1,000. The most inconceivable thing was that not a single one of his soldiers had died in battle. Only 4 of them had been injured and most of them were light injuries. They only needed to be treated before they could return to the battlefield. This was completely different from the bloody battle he had imagined. Although before the 1st Cavalry Division had entered the city, Lung Feng and the 4th Regiment had already used their cannons to blast through the city gates, preventing them from bearing the burden of sieging the city. But after entering the city, the performance of the cavalry under him was simply too valiant. Any Turpan soldier in front of them was easily defeated by a single charge, to the point that the enemy did not even have the strength to retaliate. Rather than calling it a battle, it was more accurate to call it a massacre. He had long heard that the 1st Cavalry Division was the most valiant cold weapon unit in the 5-star army, but having experienced it personally, he could not imagine it to be so valiant. In comparison, he felt that the victories he had won in the past did not count as much. In fact, they could not even be called great victories and could only be described as obvious victories. Su Kuda couldn't be blamed for this. In the past he had led an army of foreign races. Although there were some soldiers with good physical fitness, they didn't have much organization. It was difficult for them to coordinate well in battle. Yang Qindong also didn't give them more time to train. He simply let these soldiers search for experience on the battlefield. With the mentality of eliminating sand from the waves, this kind of army often didn't have much fewer casualties than the enemy. After spending so much time with such an army, It would be strange if he was not surprised to see the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division. While he was still in a daze, a cavalry unit came over from the side. The leader was the 5th Regiment commander Gong Feng. As the two regiments were not far from each other, he had also noticed Su Kuda's performance. Gong Feng was curious about this regiment commander who had fallen from the position of commander and had his own opinions. Gong Feng believed that Su Kuda was only punished because he had done something wrong. He still had a bright future ahead of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been demoted to a regiment commander but directly handed over to the Disciplinary Investigation Department. Besides, this was the position of the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. In his opinion, the value of this position was no less than that of an ordinary division commander. In fact, it might even be better. Su Kada wouldn't lose out much by coming here. Unlike them, this person would leave this place soon. After all, someone who was chosen by the 6th young master to be the commander of an army must have extraordinary ability in commanding an army. Since that was the case, there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending this person. Regiment Commander Su, the battlefield should be pretty much cleaned up, right? Using the opportunity when the team walked past the 4th Regiment, Gong Feng casually spoke. "Oh, it's Regiment Commander Gong. Is your 5th Regiment done?" Seeing that it was Gong Feng who was speaking to him, Su Kuda didn't dare to be negligent. He knew that other than himself, the other 4 regimental commanders were all very powerful. In terms of commanding ability, they weren't any worse than him. "It's done. You can also hurry up here. In fact, cleaning up the battlefield this time is relatively simple. The Mongol army from that day has already arrived. Let them take over. Our 1st Cavalry Division needs to show our might on the battlefield. There's no need to be serious about cleaning up the battlefield," Gong Feng said with his experience. Then he nodded at Su Kuda and led the team away. Looking at Gong Feng's departing figure, Su Kuda thanked him. Gong Feng had come to give him advice. It seems that he would have to learn how to adapt in the future. Of course, he knew that he wouldn't be here for too long. This could be seen from the attitude of Division Commander Tian Hu and the other regimental commanders towards him. They were very polite to him to the point that they treated him as a guest and not one of their own. Su Kuda naturally wouldn't think that he could integrate into the enemy's camp in such a short time. What he needed to do now was to use all the time he had to learn the strengths of the 1st Cavalry Division. One day when he was leading an army by himself, he should have a big change and a better performance. After the Black Goat City was successfully broken through, the next target was Willow City. When the 4th Division of Lung Feng once again moved the cannons to the city gates, unexpectedly they actually surrendered. The 12,000 Turkmen soldiers in the city all came out of the city and surrendered. Obviously, whether it was the Fire Province or the Black Goat City, they all knew that the strength of the 5-star army in front of them wasn't something that they could stop. Rather than losing their lives in the end, it was better to surrender now and at least keep one life. Following the capture of Willow City in the entire east of Turkmenistan, other than the ruined city near the Han-Hai Sea, there were no other Turkmen forces. Even this city only had 2,000 soldiers. Any one of them would be able to take it down. After dealing with the security threat in the east, Yang Chendong also needed to consider sending troops to Turkmenistan. It was time to completely destroy the Turkmenistan forces. He had this plan a long time ago. Once the various forces were in place, Yang Chendong would personally lead the troops out of Turkmenistan and begin his conquest of the Ili region. It was also at this time that the 250,000 troops of the Kazakh and Aries dynasty arrived in the Ili region. Their appearance increased the confidence of the 3 Turkmenistan countries to go against the 5-star army. After leaving Turpan, Yang Chendong decided to fight his first battle at Sabashi City, another large city in Turpan that was heading south. Based on the Intel Department's intel, there were 15,000 Turkmen soldiers in Sabashi City. They had already made preparations to defend the city. There was enough grain in the city and there were huge rocks, logs and kerosene on the city walls. They were just waiting for the 5-star army to arrive and teach them a lesson. The morale of an army depended on whether they won the battle or not. Let's put it this way, if they were defeated in a few battles, any army would face a situation where their morale was low. If there was even the slightest movement, it was very likely that they would collapse. Sabashi City was the first line of defense that Harden Bartle had left for the 5-star army. He did not even hope that the city could be defended. As long as he could delay for a period of time and make it difficult for the 5-star army, it would be considered a victory. This way, once winter arrived, the 5-star army would have no choice but to stop attacking. He wanted to see how long the 5-star army could stay here. In short, Harden Bartle was using the word, holding back. He would not take the initiative to fight the 5-star army. He wanted to use the cities one by one to slow down the 5-star army's advance. Once the 5-star army's main force dared to go around these cities, he would find a way to cut off the enemy's logistical supply and force the enemy to retreat. Unlike the new army and the other 3 armies, the 5-star army's original goal was not to attack cities. Therefore, once they encountered a city that was difficult to attack, they only needed to go around it. As for the problem of the army's food, they could fight while looting. This was what people often said about using war to support war. Although they were both part of the 5-star army, Yang Qindong's main force could not do this. His goal was to capture cities and seize large amounts of territory. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, the loss of Sabashi City could not be avoided. Yang Qindong did not think about going around it. With firearms and cannons that were hundreds of years ahead of this era, why would he want to go around it? Sieging a city? This should be his favorite mode of war. Send down the order. The 4th Lu Division will be the vanguard, the Liaodong Division will be the left, and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division will be the right. After the 4th Lu Division breaks through the gates of Sabashi City, the left and right cavalry will enter the city together. Those who surrender will live, those who resist will die. After the order was sent down, close to 30,000 5-star army moved out, leaving Yang Qindong's main force and surging forward. Yang Qindong, who was very confident in this battle, called over General Narisong of the Mongol Alliance Army and said, "Go and arrange for the people who are preparing to migrate to enter the city. Also, move all the people who should be migrating out. If there are people who are unwilling to leave their homes, forcefully take them away. If they resist, kill without mercy. Those who are not of my race will definitely have different intentions." Yang Qindong never had much patience for other factions and races. It was best if they agreed to surrender. As long as they listened to him, he did not mind giving them a better living environment. On the other hand, if they did not want to give him face, he would kill them all. He wanted to let others know that Bugnam of Gojoseon's temper was not so good. With the order given, the 5-star army quickly got busy. Following behind the main force, the Land Reform Committee also sent out a small team to follow the people who were preparing to move to Sabashi City. Yang Qindong's time was limited and he would not waste too much time in Ili. He wanted to solve the problem here as quickly as possible. Previously, when the new army passed by this place, they chose to go around it. This made the Turpan soldiers heave a sigh of relief. This time, when they saw another batch of 5-star army appear here, they knew that it would be hard to avoid this battle. However, under the orders of the defending general, they were prepared for battle. At the same time, smoke signals were lit up on the city walls, sending out warning signals. Chapter 1290. The current situation of the Turpan army was extremely bad, to the point of being somewhat miserable. In their own territory, they couldn't even communicate with each other. The only way to contact each other was to use smoke signals to determine whether they were in danger or not. This naturally had a lot to do with the fact that the new army was attacking everywhere. They did not focus on attacking cities, but rather on reducing the enemy's strength. The new Third Army had regiments and even battalions as units. Once they found a Turpan army, they would appear from all directions to surround and annihilate them. As time passed, the Turpan army could only hole up in their cities, not daring to take half a step out. They did not even dare to leave their cities, nor did they have the communication devices of the 5-star army. Right now they were like fat lambs in a pen waiting to be slaughtered. As the smoke signals rose, the city walls of Sabashi were filled with Turpan soldiers. They had even learned from the 5-star army's experience in defending Turpan, gathering the civilians who had not fled. They wanted to borrow the strength of the civilians to defend the city. However, unlike the 5-star army, they did not provide any benefits to the civilians. They were completely using the situation of grabbing able-bodied men to chase the civilians to the city walls. This method of using the civilians as cannon fodder naturally attracted the curses of the civilians. Tuoshuan City wasn't a small city. It could be considered one of the most important cities in the Turpan Kingdom. However, because it was too close to the main force of the five-star army, the Turpan soldiers had long fled. There were no civilians left in the city. The moment the five-star army arrived, they were able to move in smoothly. The largest mansion in the city also became Yang Qindong's temporary resting place. Before the residence could be completely cleaned up, the battle report from the front lines was sent over by Wang Shan. When Yang Qindong saw the contents of 4th Master Lu's report, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. His face was filled with joy as he said, "This is really like the saying, if you don't seek death you won't die. The Turpan soldiers are forcing the civilians like this, how can they still have the hearts of the people? Once the hearts of the people turn against us, we can save a lot of trouble by occupying this place." Beta Persei at the side also saw the telegram and nodded in agreement. That's right, it seems that the Turpan army does not treat the civilians as humans at all. This will cause the civilians to riot. They are shooting themselves in the foot. After saying this, Beta Persei had a worried look on his face. He continued, "There are so many civilians on the city walls, are we still going to continue running?" "Of course." Yang Qindong said with an extremely confident tone, "Right now the civilians are not our civilians, we have no obligation to ensure their safety. If they wanted to blame someone they could only blame themselves for following the wrong master. If they wanted to blame someone they could only blame themselves for not escaping from Supa City in time. Send an order, Division Commander De Chong, tell him not to have any misgivings and to proceed with the original plan. In doing so the lives of some civilians would naturally be sacrificed, but this was not in Yang Qindong's eyes. If it had to be said, he was a staunch nationalist. If the people standing on the city walls were Han civilians, he would definitely refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. This was also the reason why Xianxia did not directly declare war on Baiming and Nanming even though he was so powerful. However, there was no need to be polite to the foreigners. The deaths of these civilians would be blamed on the Turpan government. After the unexpected situation occurred, Division Commander De Chong had no choice but to report it, but he did not stop the work at hand. The muzzles of the cannons that should be adjusted were already in place. With his understanding of the 6th young master, just these foreigners alone would not be able to stop the five-star army's determination to occupy this place. As expected, the order to attack according to the original plan was sent to him. Immediately, Division Commander De Chong did not hold back. He raised the red flag high and roared, "Fire!" Boom, boom, boom. In just the first round of bombardment, out of the 6 cannonballs, 2 cannonballs accurately landed on the northern city gate. The tall city gate that normally required at least 4 people to close began to tremble as if it would break open at any moment. Second round of cannons, continue. Division Commander De Chong lowered the red flag in his hand again. Immediately, another round of cannons was fired, causing the ground to tremble again. On the city walls of Suba, the cannons suddenly fell. This caused the Turpan civilians who were originally unwilling to go up the city walls, to have a drastic change in expression. The cowardly ones had already wet their pants and sat down on the ground. Their legs were trembling and they had no strength to stand up. Most of the civilians were like this because they had never seen such powerful cannons before. In their eyes, firecrackers were not something they could come into contact with frequently, let alone cannons that were 10,000 times more powerful. In contrast, the Turpan soldiers guarding the city were also frightened. They were not mentally prepared in this regard. When the cannons fell, especially when one of the cannons landed among them, it immediately caused dozens of casualties. Looking at the broken limbs everywhere, and the smell of blood directly assaulted their nostrils. The soldiers were all trembling and their hands that were holding swords became weak. At this point, how could they still have the time to monitor the civilians' performance? The series of cannons completely disrupted the Turpan army's plan, and also caused their already low morale to drop to a freezing point. When another 6 cannons were fired, one of them destroyed the north gate of Suba. The Liaodong Cavalry Division and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed in through the gate. When the battle cries rang out in all directions, the soldiers' last line of defense completely collapsed. At this moment, most of them did not fight with their weapons. Instead, they threw down the weapons in their hands and turned to flee. This was not a battle strategy of this era, and it caused their confidence to be completely destroyed. In their hearts, an indelible thought was formed. the five-star army was not human and could not be defeated. The two divisions of cavalry smoothly entered Subashi city from the north gate. The cannons also stopped firing, but the chaos in the city did not stop. They did not expect the five-star army to arrive in front of them so quickly, and the Turpan soldiers in the city did not make any preparations. As a result, the five-star army cavalry charged in all directions, and unless they threw down their weapons and surrendered, they were all killed by the brave five-star army cavalry soldiers. There was almost no resistance, and Suba was conquered by the five-star army. They captured and injured over 10,000 enemies and saved over 30,000 civilians. From the start of the cannons to the end, it only took 6 hours. When the news of victory reached Yang Chendong, he waved his arms and said excitedly, "There is no need to pack up anymore. We will set off now and head to Suba. At the same time, we will inform the 4th Division and the rest of the front line to continue forward. Our next target is Kunlui City." Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, the First Army understood more about the situation in the Ili region through Slam. After discussing with the 4 division commanders, they finally gave up on Daoist City and chose to charge towards Nalatu City. Under the meticulous planning, Slam introduced the grain merchants to Nalatu City. Under the same method, they took another city without any bloodshed. Could be said that their progress was extremely fast. When they were about to take the city of Talhalla, the news finally leaked out. After all, this was already within the borders of the Ili Empire. Their spies were everywhere, and it was impossible for the 30,000-strong First Army of the Outsiders to remain completely silent. The city gates of Talhalla in front of them suddenly closed, the city towers filled with soldiers. When the news reached Bai Shuangji's ears, he immediately made the decision to bring the army and the provisions he plundered from the 2 cities to attack. Just when everyone thought that a siege was about to break out, the First Army of the Outsiders actually took a detour around the city, leaving Talhalla behind. They charged straight for the capital of Ili Empire from outside the city. The five-star army actually appeared in his own territory and so close to the capital. When King Bao Lide heard the news, he was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He quickly called the Prime Minister Apu to discuss countermeasures. "Prime Minister, the five-star army actually appeared. This is all thanks to you." When Bao Lide saw Apu, he held his hand tightly and spoke with a grateful expression on his face. Before, Apu had suggested that the five-star army didn't play by the rules when they fought. In order to prevent sneak attacks and sudden invasions, they should send out more scouts to keep an eye on the surrounding areas. Bao Lide didn't agree with this request from the bottom of his heart. He didn't think it was necessary. No matter how powerful the five-star army was, wasn't there a heavenly mountain between them? Even if the army could come over, they wouldn't be able to transport the grain. Moreover, the five-star army still had the Turpan kingdom to deal with. What he should do now was to do his best to solve the problem in front of him, and not go around looking for trouble with them. If this wasn't Prime Minister Apu's suggestion, King Bao Lide would have directly refused. He didn't want to hurt the Prime Minister's feelings, so he reluctantly agreed and let the Prime Minister do as he saw fit. What he didn't expect was that it was all thanks to the scouts that he sent out. Otherwise, even if the five-star army was at his doorstep, he wouldn't know anything. Apu's expression was very heavy. He didn't look happy at all because he discovered the five-star army ahead of time. In fact, this couldn't be considered as discovering the enemy ahead of time. They had already lost Little Yule City and Nalatu City. Their reaction was already half a beat too slow. "Your Majesty, I've already received the news. The five-star army really did come from Heavenly Mountain. They didn't bring a large amount of grain, they just attacked the city and looted it." Chapter 1291. What? How can they be so bold? King Baolida's already gloomy face became even more gloomy. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Yes, their guts are too big. Why don't we just eat them?" Prime Minister Ali Pu hesitated for a moment before speaking with a solemn expression. "Eat them up? Wouldn't that make us enemies with the five-star army?" King Baolida frowned. It was a pity that he was still hoping for a peaceful solution at a time like this. This was the sorrow of the weak. It was just like when the Japanese invaded China. Even though they knew that the enemy had ill intentions, they still restrained themselves. They only realized their mistake when they lost a large portion of their territory. The weak did not have any initiative on the battlefield. They were at the mercy of the enemy. Seeing that the king was still hesitating, Apu sighed and said, "Your Majesty, we can't wait any longer. The 5-star army did not even give us a heads up before attacking us. If we don't send an army to surround them, I'm afraid that once the enemy's main force arrives, we won't be able to retaliate. We still need to think about it at length. How about this? We will only send people to block them. At the same time, we will order the cities to prepare their defenses and observe the situation." King Baolido was still hoping that the 5-star legion would be at a disadvantage on the main battlefield, and they would be stopped by the Turpan Kingdom's army. If this was the case, perhaps they wouldn't even need to make a move. The 5-star army would have to withdraw from this place. In this way they would be able to obtain victory without shedding a drop of blood on their blades. Once the 5-star army retreated, they would not lose any strength. Wouldn't that be the best time to take over the Turpan and Yarqiang territories? At this moment, King Baoli was still dreaming of unifying the entire region. It was as the saying goes, a fool's dream. Apu naturally did not agree with King Baoli's words. However, he was a subject and the other party was the king. Since that was the case, he could only obey. Alright, then order the cities to defend first. Let's observe the situation first. There was one more thing that Apu didn't say. Once the ambitions of the 5-star army were exposed, the king would have no choice but to send troops to suppress them. After the two of them had a detailed discussion, the king of Baoli issued a number of orders to the generals of the major cities in Ili, telling them to exercise restraint and pay close attention to the 5-star army's movements. At the same time, they were to guard their own cities well. If it wasn't necessary, they were to not engage the 5-star army in a direct confrontation. King Baolide was satisfied. He believed that as long as he didn't provoke the other party, the 5-star army would leave if they couldn't take down the city. At the very least, his losses wouldn't be too great. On the other hand, Arab was unwilling to leave. He could clearly see how ambitious the 5-star army was. Their strength was not something a small country like Turpan could satisfy. Right now, the most important thing to do was to unite and fight against the enemy together, and not watch each other make fools of themselves and be defeated one by one. I can only persuade His Majesty next time. Let's go back. After leaving the palace, Arab sat in a sedan and headed back to the Prime Minister's residence under the protection of 20 guards. What he didn't know was that after he left this time, when he returned to this place, everything had changed. Just as Arab and his men left the palace, several pairs of eyes stared at them from a dark corner. Soon a very small voice sounded out. The target has left the palace and is heading back to his own residence. Tell everyone to be prepared. The journey from the royal palace to the Prime Minister's residence was about 6 li. Along the way they had to pass through a rather remote street. Here this street was filled with dozens of black shadows. All of them only had one goal, and that was the slowly approaching palanquin. Arab sat in the sedan with his eyes closed and a worried expression on his face. The king's reaction and point of view were very different from his, and this made him very vexed. He had always believed that he was the enemy. When facing the ambitious 5-star army, it was fine if he didn't make a move, but if he did, he had to make sure that he hit the enemy with a heavy blow. Only then could he make the enemy feel pain and retreat. Although doing this might lead to the retaliation of the 5-star army, if he didn't do this, would they let him off so easily? The 5-star army's strategic intentions were very clear. They had set their sights on this piece of land and wanted to occupy it. This created an irreconcilable conflict between the two sides. Since this was the case, what difference did it make if they started the war a day earlier or a day later? If they didn't take advantage of the fact that the enemy had yet to gain a firm foothold and missed this opportunity, they might not have another chance like this in the future. No, I have to persuade His Majesty in the future that he can't be soft on the 5-star army. The enemy only has 30,000 cavalry. As long as he plans well with the geographical advantage, it won't be difficult to mobilize 100,000 cavalry. At that time, with an absolute advantage in numbers, victory will be within reach. As he muttered to himself, several military plans began to take shape in Apal's mind. Clank, clang. The palanquin suddenly fell to the ground without any warning. Alapu, who was deep in thought, lost his balance and nearly fell out of the palanquin. The sudden change caused his expression to change. He immediately shouted angrily, "What's going on?" Although Apol's temperament was good and he took good care of the people around him, anyone would be angry after being tossed around like this. He was also an exception. After shouting angrily, he wanted to lift the palanquin to check. But before he could do anything, the palanquin's curtains opened from the outside, and a very unfamiliar face appeared. After carefully sizing up the shocked Apu, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. That's right. We can verify his identity now. Take him away. What did he mean by verifying his identity? Apol didn't quite understand, but he knew it wasn't anything good. When he thought of the fact that he was in the middle of the city and there should be soldiers patrolling around, he wanted to shout loudly to attract more people. But his actions were already under the eyes of the stranger. He saw an arm coming at him through the air, then his neck stiffened. His body fell to the side and he lost consciousness. Just like that, Prime Minister Apol was taken away. More than an hour later, a group of patrolling soldiers passed by and saw the sedan. After confirming that it belonged to the Prime Minister, they immediately sent people to investigate. It didn't take long for the news of Prime Minister Apol's disappearance to reach the palace. Soon King Bao Lide's shouts could be heard. Find him. Find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground. These shouts caused the generals who came to report to tremble and complain inwardly. But if they knew that Apol had already been sent out of the capital by the intelligence department, they wouldn't be complaining, they would be crying for help. Soon the news reached the ears of Yang Chendong, who was on his way to Kunlo City. His expression didn't change and he said in a thick voice, "Understood, tell Chuisho to protect Apol's safety, this person is very useful." This matter was arranged by Yang Chendong. To be able to become a famous prime minister, there are many records in history. Such a person, Yang Chendong, has a lot of scruples in his heart. Of course, he wouldn't underestimate such an opponent, so he sent Chuisho to lead ninjas to carry out the kidnapping plan. The operation code was called Needle Extraction. Sure enough, they didn't disappoint. The ninjas who dared to fully submit to the prime minister were able to do such a thing without anyone noticing. After contacting the local situation team, they quickly made a targeted plan. A burst of poisonous smoke was scattered, and the whole operation didn't cause any commotion. Without Apol's protection, it was like a bird that lost a wing. The threat it posed was greatly reduced. This also created more opportunities for Bai Shuang's First Army's military plan. For example, after receiving the king's order, the cities of the Yili Empire were all in a state of self-defense. Their gates were tightly closed, and they looked like they were on the verge of death. But what they didn't know was that Shuang Bai never intended to attack a city. Even when he took over Little Yule City, it was only to replenish his food supplies. Their main task was to cause destruction, to disrupt the social order of the Yili Empire and to attack their strength. Some large cities have the help of their gates, which can be closed for defense. But some villages and towns can't, and these places became the targets of the First Army. They rode fast horses and rushed into the houses of large families, but whenever they encountered resistance, they would kill without mercy. After creating one bloody case after another, they would even open the granaries of the rich families. Apart from taking away some of the things that they needed, they would leave the rest untouched, allowing the wind to blow on them, allowing the sun to shine on them, and allowing the ordinary people around to spy on them. At first, the commoners were afraid of the power of these large families, so they didn't dare act rashly. But 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and some of the more daring people entered the manor. When they saw the ground covered in corpses, the fear in their hearts disappeared, and the piles of food that had already been opened up were quickly snatched clean by these people. This happened once, and when this happened frequently and the large family's food was exposed to the commoners again and again, they no longer hesitated, nor would they wait for a day or two. They only needed to see the 5-star Army's cavalry leave, and then they would take action to snatch. The news that they could fill their stomachs quickly spread like the wind, to the extent that in some places before the 5-star Army appeared, some of the more daring commoners gathered together and charged into the large families, killing people and giving out food, and in the end, shifting the blame to the 5-star Army. Chapter 1292. To be able to store so much food at home in a year of famine, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was rich and heartless. Such a person died, then so be it, there was nothing to feel pity about. As for shifting the blame to the five-star army, Bai Shuang didn't really care. These people's actions had indirectly helped him, expanding the reputation of the five-star army, so why not? Bai Shuang clearly remembered that his teacher Yang Chendong had said more than once that the existence of social class was the greatest restriction to the five-star army in Xianxia. This was especially true for some of the nobles. Although the dynasties changed frequently, they would never fall. People like this who only cared about their own interests and had no loyalty to the current dynasty would often become new meritorious officials of a new dynasty. There was nothing wrong with killing such people who had no ruler, no country, and no father. Only by killing all of these people would the five-star army have a better chance of conquering and controlling the land. Not only that, if they did it well, they would gain the support of the commoners. In comparison, the commoners were the ones who suffered the most. They had been oppressed by these nobles for who knew how many years. Some of them had been oppressed since their ancestors, so it was impossible for them to not be angry. The only reason why they didn't say anything was because they were too cowardly and didn't have enough strength. Since it was like this, the five-star army could help them and be the leader. Reality proved that this was indeed quite effective. This was because in many places, especially the commoners who had been oppressed by the nobles, began to look forward to the arrival of the five-star army. Some of the more far-sighted ones had already brought their travel expenses with them to find the five-star army and join them. Their many years of life experience told them that only the five-star army could save them. Only the five-star army could help them change their lives. Bai Shuang fully understood his teacher Yang Chendong's philosophy and did as he was told. The result was that not only did the strength of the foreign race's first army not decrease, it was instead continuously expanding. As for the young and strong civilians who wanted to join the army, he accepted them all and organized them into the 4 divisions under his command. With the presence of these people, they would be more familiar with and understand the surrounding environment. Some of the following military battle plans would also be better supplemented and perfected. The effect was so good that Yang Chendong had never thought of it before. Compared to the first army, the progress of the new 5 armies was also very smooth. Even though they didn't recruit the local commoners as soldiers, because there was a Raf who understood the Yirkiang tribe extremely well, this captured general completely stood on the side of the five-star army. Based on his understanding of the Yirkiang tribe, the new five-star army could often achieve twice the results with half the effort. Their entry also gave King Agudemu a huge headache. Unlike King Baelide, the Yarkiang's King Agudemu chose to fight head-on. He had sent out 100,000 cavalrymen to search for the main force of the new five-star army, and wanted to have a decisive battle with them. In his mind, this was his territory and he had the advantage in terms of timing, location, and manpower. He also had a huge advantage in terms of military strength. Why couldn't he deal a heavy blow to the five-star army and win a huge victory? However, how could Commander Shi Wanshan, who fully followed Yang Chendong's orders, do as he wished? He was originally a general of the Great Ming Dynasty, and had a deep understanding of Sun Tzu's art of war. Based on Araf's introduction of the situation, he and his opponent started to engage in guerrilla warfare. For a moment, both sides were fighting back and forth and neither side had a clear winner. Compared to the first army and the new five-star army, the new army led by Su He quickly encountered a huge mail. He continuously bypassed many important cities, and arrived at the Iron Gate Pass to attack the rear of the Turkopan kingdom. At that moment, 100,000 cavalrymen were rushing towards their location. They were the reinforcements sent by the Kazakh Empire to support the 3 countries. The general leading them was still Janibek Khan's younger brother, Kaliyai. Last time he had brought 80,000 soldiers and lost 30,000 of them. This made him feel extremely ashamed. This time when he set out for the second time he had already made a decision. He had also fully absorbed the experience of the previous battle. He wanted to lead the army alone. Kaliyai had always believed that his previous defeat wasn't because he was inferior to the five-star army, but because his allies weren't strong enough. As the saying goes, don't fear a godlike opponent but fear a pig-like opponent. This was what he thought. This time he didn't inform anyone that he was leading an army of 100,000. He also didn't have any intention of joining forces with any country. Apart from contacting them when he needed provisions, he spent the rest of his time traveling alone. He wanted to find the main force of the five-star army, and have a decisive battle with them. The heavens seemed to know what he was thinking and gave him a chance. When he learned from the scouts that there was a 30,000-strong 5-star army just 150 li away from them, he became extremely excited. Good, very good. Pass down the order for the army to speed up. We must surround the 30,000 5-star army. When moving behind the enemy lines without enough information, it was easy to fall into danger. So he felt a great amount of pressure. The number of scouts he sent out was sufficient, and the distance they covered was far enough. This was the reason why he didn't lose. With the existence of these excellent scouts, the moment the 100,000 Kazakh Empire troops appeared 100 li away, the news was sent back. When he learned that the enemy had 100,000 cavalrymen, the first thing Zhou Xian did wasn't to run away, but to calm down and consider whether or not he could take down these 100,000 soldiers. 30,000 against 100,000, and he still wanted to take down the enemy. This was no different from a snake trying to swallow an elephant. In the eyes of others, this was overestimating one's capabilities. However, in the eyes of Zhou Xian and his new army, this really wasn't an impossible task. It was because of the 3 armies sent to attack the enemy's rear. His new army was the closest to Yang Qindong's main force, as well as the one with the highest chance of receiving assistance in the shortest amount of time. Send a report to the 6th young master, tell him about the situation here, tell him about our plans to take down the enemy and our battle plan. After just a stick of incense's time, Zhou Xian made his decision. He wanted to create a miracle. The messenger quickly left after receiving the order. Zhou Xian then said to the 4 division commanders at his side, "Inform the soldiers to rest here. We need to recover our strength in preparation for the great battle." When he saw how confident Zhou Xian was, the 4th Cavalry Division's commander Chang Bo couldn't help but feel worried. "Military commander, will the king agree to our request?" These words attracted the attention of the other 3 division commanders. It was clear that this was also a question they were concerned about. However, Zhou Xian's expression didn't seem to care as he said, "If the 6th young master agrees, then we'll fight this battle well. If he doesn't agree, then we'll retreat. It's just a moment of rest." Zhou Xian's meaning was extremely clear. He wasn't sure if Yang Qindong would agree, so he made 2 preparations. Would Yang Qindong agree? When the telegram was sent, he didn't immediately give an answer. Instead, he stared at the telegram for a long time. The Kazakh Empire and the Aries dynasty had sent a total of 250,000 cavalrymen to aid the Middle Kingdom. He had already received the news from the intelligence department. Yang Qindong welcomed their troops because it gave him an excuse to invade the 2 countries. Just like when he entered the Ili region, didn't he also say that he wanted to take revenge? Even though the matter of Ili sending troops had happened a long time ago, this excuse was a bit forced. But even if it was an excuse, who cared if it was prudent or not? And now, these 2 countries had given him a legitimate reason. However, to achieve the effect of this ambush and for the military plans to be completed smoothly, there was another point that couldn't be ignored. That was whether or not the Turpan army would send out their troops. Chapter 1293. If the Turpan army were to send troops to assist the Kazakh army, or to help them intercept the Kazakh army, then what they would have to face would not only be 100,000 enemy cavalry but even more. If that was the case, whether or not they could smoothly win this battle would be full of suspense. When the 2 division commanders raised their concerns, Yang Qindong confidently waved his hand. "No, that won't happen. Kelly is a very conceited person. Last time he lost to us, so he won't accept it. This time he has the opportunity to fight with us alone, so he won't lightly ask for help from the Turpan army. Besides, unless it is necessary, he won't be willing to share such a big merit with others. You can rest assured about this. Of course, if the battle doesn't reach a state where we can kill them in one blow, then no one knows what will happen. This requires us to appear outside the ambush area on time. As long as we can do this and trap the enemy in Tianbo Mound, then even if they ask for help, it will be too late." Yang Qindong deeply understood the principle of knowing oneself and knowing one's enemy to be victorious in 100 battles. Often, when facing an army, the attitude of the enemy's general would determine the final direction of the battle. It could be said that he had studied Kelly thoroughly, which was why he could say these words so confidently. Seeing the 6th young master so confident, Tian Hu and Ling Daqiang looked at each other and nodded. In their view, even if there was an accident in the battle and Kalai asked for help from the Turpan army with their ability, they could just retreat. Would they really be surrounded? After the three of them discussed for a while, they came up with a final strategy. Then the two generals left the tent to count the troops. Yang Chendong also called Beta Persei and asked him to gather 2,000 black cavalry to prepare to fight with the 4th Division. At the same time, he also asked Wang Shan to send a telegram to the new army commander Xu He, ordering him to lure the enemy in and lead the Kazakh cavalry into Tianbo Mound and into the ambush area. With a single order, the army began to get busy. In order to not alert the enemy, Yang Chendong ordered the remaining troops to continue towards Kunlai city and attack the city according to the plan to attract the enemy's attention. Meanwhile, he himself led the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards and the main force of the 4th Division to leave the official road and head towards Bo Tian Mound. The location of the ambush had been determined, and the next thing to do was to reach the location within the specified time. This would determine the success or failure of this battle. Therefore, after leaving the official road, Yang Chendong and the Black Cavalry rode fast horses and galloped with the main force of the 4th Division. In order to reach their destination on time, the soldiers of the 4th Army Division traveled light. They didn't bring anything they didn't need to ensure their speed. It was the same for the Black Knights and Dragon Guards. Each of them was given 3 strong horses. After a while, they would change horses to ensure that they maintained the same speed as they reached their destination. At the same time, the new army commander Xu He received the order. After seeing Yang Chendong's telegram, he called the 4 division commanders over. First, he found the location of Tianbo Mound on the sand table, and then read out the military order. Everyone, this time the 6th young master will personally lead the troops into battle. Our new army's opportunity to show off has come. Now I announce that the task of luring the enemy will be handed over to Xu He didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, he looked at the 4 division commanders one by one. Feeling Xu He's gaze, the 4 division commanders tried their best to raise their heads, showing their determination to fight. The task will be handed over to the 1st Cavalry Division. Division Commander Ku, is there a problem? In the end, his gaze fell on Division Commander Bai Kai. The 4 division commanders of the new army were all brave and fierce. On the battlefield, they were all experts on horseback, but at the same time they all had their own specialties. But in terms of commanding ability, Ku Lu, who almost became a division commander, was better. This person was good at coordinating the overall situation, especially when it came to defense. Giving this task to him was the most reassuring. Ku Lu's body tensed up when his name was called. He knew that this was the division commander's way of giving him a chance to perform. Previously, because he helped the 1st Army's former division commander, Su Kuda, hide military intelligence, he was given a warning, and because of that he lost the chance to become a division commander. Now that the opportunity had appeared in front of him again, he immediately replied loudly. Yes, I promise to complete the task. It's good to have confidence, but this time, you're using a division to lure 100,000 soldiers. In order to not let them see anything, the other 3 divisions must retreat and not give you any help. Can be said that the success or failure of this battle will all depend on you. Do you understand the importance of this task? After all, this was not a small matter. It involved the victory or defeat of nearly 200,000 soldiers. Xu He had no choice but to remind Ku Lu. This subordinate understands. Division commander, please rest assured. If this task is not completed, I will bring my head to see you. Ku Lu naturally knew the difficulty of this task, but he was not afraid. He believed in the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division. He also believed that as long as the preparations were done well, the task would definitely be completed. Good. What he needed was Ku Lu's determination. Xu He nodded with satisfaction. Then he ordered the other 3 divisions to raise their flags and pretend to retreat in a sorry state. Of course, this was to let the Kazakh cavalry see. This was also the only thing he could do for Ku Lu's 1st Cavalry Division. After that, the 3 divisions of the new army's main force ran away. In order to make it seem more realistic, Xu He ordered the troops to throw away some of their equipment after a certain distance. This made it seem like they were retreating in a hurry and fleeing in a sorry state. Only by doing this could they lure the enemy's army into an ambush circle. This action of the new army was quickly discovered by the Kazakh cavalry scouts. One by one they reported it to General Kalai, causing him to laugh uncontrollably. Good, it seems like our sudden appearance has indeed caught the 5-star army off guard. Very good, order the army to speed up and catch up to the 5-star army. Then we'll eat them up. After Kalai returned to Kazakh after his defeat, although his brother Janibek Khan did not blame him, he still felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Especially the unwillingness in his heart. From the beginning to the end he did not have a chance to properly fight with the 5-star army. This made him feel even more unjust. If it was a fair battle and he lost, then there was nothing to say. However, losing to an ally was something that he could not accept. This time he brought another 100,000 troops to battle. He had thought it through and decided that he must have a fair battle with the 5-star army. He wanted to let the enemy know the power of the Kazakh cavalry. Kalai happily gave the order. His deputy, who was personally placed in the army by Janibek Khan, narrowed his eyes and stepped out. General, should we send a message to the king of Turpan and ask him to cooperate with us to block the 5-star army's escape route? Hearing this suggestion, Kalai did not immediately reply. Instead he fell into deep thought. Of course he knew that blocking the two sides was much more effective than chasing after them alone. However, deep in his bones he did not trust these allies. He did not want to share this great merit with others. If the Turpan army appeared and blocked the 5-star army's escape route, then he would be very unwilling to share the merit with others. After thinking about it again and again, he decided to give it a try. If it really did not work, then he would send someone to inform the Turpan army. Furthermore, he had 100,000 soldiers and the enemy only had 30,000 cavalry. No matter how he looked at it, there was no possibility of him losing. Kalai was just like Yang Chendong. He did not inform the Turpan army of the situation. This was also his fate. This would also become the most regretful thing in his life. After making up his mind, Kalai ordered General Porta to be the vanguard and move quickly. The order he gave was to quickly chase after the escaping 5-star army and viciously bite their tails. It would be best if they could tangle with them and create enough time and opportunity for the main force to arrive and form an encirclement. Porta was also a famous general in Kazakh. After receiving the order, he immediately ordered 10,000 cavalrymen and 3 days' worth of rations to leave the barracks and run in the direction of the new army's escape route. To be appointed as the vanguard general, Porta was very ambitious. He wanted to achieve the greatest merit to prove his ability. However, this raging fire was quickly extinguished. Just as he was about to reach a valley after forcefully marching for 100 miles, countless arrows suddenly flew out from both sides of the road. His vanguard of 1,000 cavalrymen quickly suffered heavy losses. In the end, only 200 to 300 of them managed to escape. They had a bad start. When Porta heard the news, he was very angry. He angrily scolded the vanguard general for being incompetent and cowardly. Then he personally led 3,000 cavalrymen to the front. As expected, as soon as they arrived, they were attacked by arrows. However, Porta was prepared and quickly launched a counterattack. He ordered his cavalrymen to split into 2 groups and rush to the high ground on both sides. Under Porta's command, the 3,000 cavalrymen rushed through the waves of arrows and rushed to the top of the valley, which was more than 20 meters high. The 2,005-star army that were lying in ambush here kept retreating. Many bows and quivers were thrown all over the ground, and the few war horses were abandoned as well. Ha ha ha. Seeing the result of this battle and the 5-star soldiers rushing into the dense forest in the distance, Boda threw his head back and laughed heartily to release the joy in his heart. However, he did not notice that although they had captured a lot, they did not leave behind a single 5-star army soldier. However, at this moment he was completely enjoying the feeling of victory. Everything else had already been thrown to the back of his mind. Do you see that? This is the powerful 5-star army that people have been talking about. Come on, let's continue forward. Porta was happy and the vanguard continued to move forward. Chapter 1294. After another 5 kilometers, another wave of arrows arrived. But this time the Kazakh cavalry were prepared and did not panic. Other than a few dozen who were injured by the first wave of arrows, the rest of the cavalry quickly rushed up the canyon and chased away the 5-star army. After 2 consecutive victories, the Kazakh army's morale was greatly boosted and their speed seemed to have increased a lot. However, after 5 kilometers, Another wave of arrows came, forcing them to slow down their pace. Because of this, there were a total of 5 waves of arrows by the time the sky turned dark. The distance of the attacks had also changed from once every 10 miles to once every 5 miles. Fortunately, this kind of attack did not cause too much damage to the Kazakh vanguard. The total number of Kazakh cavalry was less than 1,000. This was also because they lost 600 to 700 cavalry in the first wave. Considering that it was dark and difficult to see, Boda had to order the army to stop and rest in order to avoid falling into the enemy's trap. Bota, who was lying in the temporary tent, had a face full of excitement. Today he had repelled 5 waves of attacks from the 5-star army and obtained 2,000 sets of bows. This was an amazing achievement. With such a satisfied smile on her face, the Buster woman slept all the way until dawn. What made him feel a little regretful was that the 5-star army did not come to harass him that night. This made the 4,000 cavalry that he had hidden outside the camp not come in handy, which was somewhat disappointing. But did this mean that the 5-star army did not have the ability to ambush him and that they had already left? General Bota, who possessed the spirit of Aku, gave the order to advance at full speed after breakfast. After walking for a full 20 miles, they did not encounter any harassment or attacks. This made Bota even more certain that the 5 astral legions had escaped. Now he could finally let go of his hands and feet and advance at full speed. Not long after his order was issued, the army's formation began to scatter after advancing for more than 3 kilometers. The arrow attacks that had disappeared for a while appeared again. The attacks from the bows and arrows in the dense forest were even more intense than before. In just one wave of attacks, over 100 riders were hit by the arrows. Cries of pain and curses rose and fell one after another. The sudden counterattack was completely unexpected, and the Kazakh cavalry who had already lowered their vigilance suffered a great loss. What was even more frightening was that after the 2 waves of arrows were fired, the 5-star army still charged forward, brandishing their sabers as they charged into the enemy's ranks. Immediately, streams of blood splattered out, dyeing the 5-star army's armor red. "Don't panic, counterattack, counterattack." Seeing soldiers falling off their horses, Bota roared and led the cavalry around him in a counterattack. However, the 5-star army's cavalry came quickly and left even faster. They didn't give Porta a chance to counterattack and disappeared into the dense forest on both sides. By the time Sark's army arrived, they had already disappeared. This was clearly a premeditated attack. With the mentality of running after one shot, they came and went without a trace. After they left, General Bota sadly discovered that in just half an hour he had lost over 1,000 cavalrymen, and the number of injured soldiers had increased by nearly 1,000. This kind of loss was a huge blow to General Bota. They hadn't even engaged the enemy yet, but they had already lost nearly 30% of their strength. This made him have no choice but to be vigilant and send as many scouts as possible into the dense forest to ensure the safety of the vanguard. The advantage of doing this was that the possibility of a surprise attack was very small, but because of this, the marching speed of the army had to be slowed down. 15 miles away, the commander of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kulu, was waiting for news with the main force. After seeing the 1st Regiment return, Kulu couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Especially when he saw the smell of blood on the returning soldiers, he knew that the harvest was not small. Division Master, according to the mission, the scouts have reported that the enemy has already slowed down their marching pace. The tanned commander Wu Ba chuckled, his face full of pride. In this battle he had led 2,000 cavalrymen and achieved a 1:1 ratio of casualties. On the other hand, he had lost less than 50 cavalrymen. This result could be said to be perfect. Hearing Wu Ba's report, Kulu nodded with satisfaction. "Very good. This time your 1st regiment will be given a merit. Next we will continue to harass them. In short, we must delay the enemy's advance. 80 miles behind us is Bo Tian Mound. That will be the end of our retreat." There were still 3 days before the main force would complete the encirclement. In other words, he had to hold on for 3 more days. A distance of 80 miles could be covered in just a few hours for elite cavalrymen. One could imagine how much pressure he was under. As the regiment commander, Wu Ba naturally knew about their 1st Cavalry Division's mission. The complacent expression on his face immediately vanished. "Don't worry, division leader. We will definitely complete the mission. Even if we have to sacrifice all of our brothers, we will still hold on for 3 days. That's right. This time, even if all of our 1st Cavalry Division dies, we will not let the enemy pass through Bo Tian Mount. Commander Kulu, who had always advocated for the smallest price to obtain the greatest victory, also changed his style at this moment. He was ready to go all out. If it was said that the loss of the 1st Cavalry Division would be able to kill 100,000 Kazakh cavalrymen, it would be worth it no matter how one looked at it. When Kulu received this mission, he knew that this was going to be a fierce battle. Although he did not like this way of fighting as a soldier, it was his duty to obey orders. For the greatest victory, so what if the 1st Cavalry Division lost their lives here? General Botha naturally did not know Kulu's plan. Because of the repeated attacks, he became more cautious. When the army advanced, the distance between the cavalrymen became closer. In addition, the number of scouts increased. Although the 5-star army would occasionally appear to harass the enemy, most of them were repelled by General Botha. The army did not suffer any losses. The price of this was that the marching speed of the army was very slow, to the point that by noon the next day, General Kaliai had already caught up to them with the main force. After seeing the vanguard moving so slowly, Kaliai was naturally dissatisfied. He had a guard call Botha over and scolded him. Botha also knew that the marching speed was too slow, so he did not say anything. When he saw that Kaliai was tired of scolding, he made his request. He needed more cavalry. Only by increasing the number of scouts could the army advance faster. Kaliai still valued Botha very much. Otherwise, he would not have arranged for him to be the vanguard general. Since Botha said so, he naturally had his own considerations and difficulties. Kaliai quickly agreed to this request. He immediately assigned 5,000 cavalrymen to the vanguard as scouts. With the addition of these new cavalrymen, whenever there was a dense forest on both sides of the road, groups of cavalrymen would rush into it, looking for any unsafe factors. It was also because of this action that several companies of the 5-star army that had been lying in ambush were discovered. Among them, one company was a little slow in retreating and was surrounded by these Kazakh cavalry scouts. After an hour of bitter battle, the company was completely wiped out. When the news reached the ears of Division Commander Kulu, his face became very serious. There were still 2 days before the main force could complete the encirclement. The speed and reaction of the Kazakh cavalry far exceeded his expectations. If he did not send out the main force, he was afraid that they would not be able to last until then. Order the 2nd Regiment to attack in units. In short, the main task is to delay the enemy's advance. If we can fight, then we can. If we can delay, then we can. Kulu gave the order with a pained expression. When he saw the 2nd Regiment commander leading the soldiers of the 2nd Regiment away, his eyes were filled with tears. He was very clear in his heart that it would be good if 20% of the soldiers came back. They are all heroes. Gazing at the departing figures of the 2nd Regiment, the 1st Regiment commander Wu Ba also spoke like this. Then when he turned around to look at Kulu, he stood at attention and said, "Senior Commander, the 1st Regiment requests permission to attack after the 2nd Regiment. No. The 1st Regiment will stay behind and fight for the last time." Kulu shook his head. In terms of fighting strength, the 1st Regiment was naturally the strongest. Since that was the case, the best steel should be used on the edge of the blade. When the time came, he and the 1st Regiment would be the last barrier to stop the Kazakh army from advancing. Time passed by minute. The 3rd Regiment of the 4th Regiment and the 2,000 black cavalry led by Yang Chendong had arrived at the designated location 3 hours earlier than planned. From their point of view, they could faintly hear the sounds of killing from time to time. "Young master, our soldiers have found suitable places to hide." Beta Persei returned to Yang Chendong's side after patrolling the army. At the same time, he reported to Yang Chendong with a trace of worry on his face. Yang Chendong knew what Beta Persei was worried about. Not long ago, the commander of the new army, Su He, sent a telegram. After they got rid of the scouts sent by the Kazakh army, they were now rushing to the exit of Botian Mound. In other words, the main force of the new army had not arrived yet. Now only the 1st Cavalry Division, who had stayed here in advance, could fight the enemy. A division of only 8,000 people, but they had to stop 100,000 iron cavalry. One could imagine how difficult this task was. Even if Beta Persei led the team, he could not guarantee that they would be able to complete the task. After Yang Qindong heard the report, his expression did not change. He put away the military binoculars in his hand and said without turning his head, "Go and ask where the 1st Cavalry Division is and how long it will take to reach the designated location." Chapter 1295. Yes, I'll go right away. Beta Persei agreed and rushed to Wang Shan's telegram team. Yang Qindong, who was left behind, slowly turned around and sighed softly. How could he not know what kind of pressure the new army's 1st Cavalry Division was facing at this time? It was even possible that the entire division would be wiped out if they were not careful. But this was war, a war of blood and iron. It was either you die or I die. Anyone who was in the middle of it, if they showed even the slightest bit of mercy, they might cause the army to be doomed eternally. As the saying goes, the merciful cannot command an army. To achieve one's goal, there must be sacrifices. As long as the sacrifice was worth it, someone must do it. No matter how reluctant he was, he had to harden his heart. He had to be willing to give up. Only by giving up could he gain something. He saw this point very clearly and was also very rational. Now he only hoped that the 1st Cavalry Division could arrive at the designated location as soon as possible. This way, the pressure on the new army's 1st Cavalry Division should be much less. The 1st Cavalry Division was indeed the trump card of the cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Tian Hu, they had been hurrying on their way ever since they received the mission. During this period, many warhorses fell to the side of the road due to exhaustion, foaming at the mouth. But Tian Hu still did not order the troops to slow down. He only left a company of soldiers to take care of these meritorious warhorses. The main force of the division was still moving forward bravely. After several days of continuous travel, even the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, who were regarded as the most elite and powerful existence among the cavalry, still had many soldiers whose legs were worn out and blood flowed down their trousers. There were also some soldiers who did not get any rest for a long time. They fell asleep while sitting on their war horses. Some even fell off their horses because they could not hold the reins and were injured. There were casualties at any time. But no matter what happened, Tian Hu did not ask them to stop even once. Even if they had to eat, he asked the soldiers to eat on horseback. It was only at this time that the war horses would slow down from their galloping state. But even so, the cavalry soldiers were still a bit faster than the other cavalry units. After a few days of non-stop travel, they finally arrived at the designated ambush location. At this moment they were 8 hours ahead of schedule. This half a day's time was bought with the lives of the brave warriors of the 1st Cavalry Division. According to the statistics, out of the 20,000 people in the division, the number of non-combat casualties during the march had reached 2,000. They were the world's #1 cavalry division. Every soldier who could enter this place was carefully selected. Even so, the losses they suffered were so great. It could be imagined that this operation was clearly not a mission, but a race against time and life. As soon as they entered battle position, the transmitter immediately reported the news to Yang Qindong through the radio. After hearing the news, Yang Qindong, who always had a cold expression on the battlefield, couldn't help but exclaim loudly, "Good, the soldiers are all good. After this battle, all of you will have meritorious service. Now it is time for us to attack. Inform the new army and the 1st Cavalry Division that we will launch an all-out attack in half an hour. We must annihilate the enemy." Within the long and narrow Batian Mound Canyon, the battle was currently in full swing. The smell of blood filled everyone's nostrils. Blood could be seen everywhere, dyeing the ground red. The Kazakh army's performance was far more ferocious than Division Commander Kulu had expected. They seemed to have already seen through the 5-star army's intention to stop them. As soon as they entered the canyon, they launched a frenzied attack. As if frightened by the tall mountains and boulders on both sides of the road, General Kellei continuously sent reinforcements to the vanguard, striving to leave this place as quickly as possible, rushing out of this dangerous place that he felt was far from good. During this period of time, General Kellei did hesitate. After looking at the surrounding terrain, he discovered that this was a very good place to set up an ambush. He thought of ordering the army to retreat. Since there was the 5-star army blocking the way, they could just retreat from here. However, when he considered the fact that there were carriages carrying provisions and supplies behind them, it would be easy for the cavalry to turn around. However, it wouldn't be so easy for the supply carriages to turn around. If they rashly moved forward, the army would be in chaos and a scene of internal strife would occur. At that time, if the 5-star army came from behind, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yesterday, the scouts also sent news that they didn't discover any 5-star army's main force. I think my worries were unnecessary. Kelly comforted himself like this. At the same time, he had a trace of hope in his heart. He also gave the vanguard General Bota a death order. Within 4 hours they had to open this passage and let the army smoothly pass through here. For this he added another 10,000 soldiers to the vanguard. Bota, who had the authority to command more troops, had his morale greatly boosted. Under his command he led the cavalry to charge forward fiercely and quickly wiped out the main force of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division. After a series of battles, the exit of the canyon was right in front of them. Hope was right in front of them. The 1st Cavalry Division, who fought with all their might, couldn't stop themselves from retreating. During this time, Kulu, who was the division commander, also pulled out his saber and joined the battle. Even the direct subordinate battalion of the 1st Cavalry Division charged forward. It was precisely because Kulu had suppressed the last of his strength that he was able to save the life of the 1st Regiment commander, Wu Ba, allowing this regiment commander who had already fainted to be pulled back from the battlefield. However, at this time, there were less than 500 cavalrymen left. In a short 2 days, the 1st Cavalry Division went from a full strength of 8,400 men to less than 1,000 men. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were almost completely wiped out. This result was far more tragic than what Kulu had imagined. Kulu, who was wearing a white battle robe that was now dyed red, turned his wrist and looked at the military watch that the 6th young master had personally given to him. His face was gloomy. There were still 14 hours until the appointed time, but the soldiers in his hands were almost exhausted. Perhaps in the next charge the entire army would be wiped out. He might also die on the battlefield like the majority of the soldiers, wrapped in horse hide. If he were to die on the battlefield, Kulu had already mentally prepared himself for this from the day he joined the 5-star army. However, he really couldn't accept dying like this. He still hadn't completed his mission. Once the Kazakh army charged out of the canyon behind them, all of the plans that Yang Chendong had made before would become useless. The soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division would also die in vain. This was something that he absolutely couldn't accept. Fight no matter what, we have to hold on for 16 hours. Kulu used his blood-soaked battle robe to wipe the glowing white saber in his hand. His face flashed with a resolute expression. There were less than 1,000 cavalrymen around him. Most of them were injured and some of them were even seriously injured. They were still bleeding. However, at this moment no one doubted his words. They firmly believed that as long as they were still alive, they wouldn't allow any enemy to charge out. Kulu arranged for 2 bodyguards to send the unconscious Wu Ba away. This could be considered the last bloodline that he left for the 1st Cavalry Division. Then he looked up at the sky. It was currently noon. The sun hung high in the sky, emitting a gentle warmth. The sunlight shone on every soldier's body. Kill. After the Kazakh army reorganized the cavalry, they once again charged forward. This time General Bota personally led the charge. This showed that they were determined to solve this problem in one battle. The battle cries of the opposing cavalry resounded throughout the canyon. Looking from afar, sand and dust filled the sky. There were probably more than 10,000 cavalrymen. Some people said that when there were more than 10,000 cavalrymen, there was no end to them. At this moment Kulu and the less than 1,000 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division felt that way. It was like a ferocious beast with its mouth wide open. It made people feel fearful. At this moment, no matter if it was Kulu, the division commander, or the soldiers, their faces didn't change. It was as if they didn't see the approaching danger. Every soldier only tightly gripped the saber in their hands, looking as if they were facing death with equanimity. For the soldiers who had already disregarded life and death and even had the heart to die, there was no difference whether there were 1,000 or 10,000 enemies. They only knew that they had to use the last of their strength to block the enemy until they were killed and couldn't move anymore. Everyone, hold your sabers and prepare to charge with me. The target was constantly approaching. When it was less than 3 li away, Kulu also raised the sharp saber in his hand, looking like a moth flying into a flame. Kill. The remaining less than 1,000 cavalrymen also raised their sabers at this moment. Every one of them had a serious expression and didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Just as Kulu's saber was about to fall from the air and slash down, a loud bugle suddenly sounded, resounding in the ears of every soldier of the 1st Cavalry Division. This is the retreat signal. Kulu instantly reacted when he heard the bugle. Then he immediately turned to look at the 2 remaining bugle masters of the 1st Cavalry Division. After confirming that it wasn't them who made the sound, he saw that they had the same doubts as him. Ma. Division Commander, this is the retreat signal. After the 2 bugle masters recovered from their shock, they said in unison. It really is the retreat signal. Retreat. After getting a definite answer, Kulu only hesitated for a moment before shouting loudly. As if he was afraid that the others didn't react quickly enough, he was the first to tighten the reins of his saber and made a gesture of turning around. At this moment, the retreat signal was definitely the main force of the 5-star army. In other words, all the plans were in place and the 1st Cavalry Division's mission was completed. At this moment, he didn't want to lose any of his cavalry brothers because after going through so many bloody battles, those who could still survive and continue to jump on their horses to kill the enemy would be the best of the best. If he kept one of these people, there would be more elite soldiers in the future. These were all treasures and they couldn't afford to lose them. Chapter 1296. First, there was the signal to retreat. Next, there was Kulu's movement. Close to 1,000 5-star soldiers all turned their horses around and followed behind Kulu, quickly heading towards the exit of the canyon behind them. At this time, the 10,000 Kazakh riders led by Boda were only a little more than a mile away from them. For a real cavalry, this distance could be reached in about 100 breaths. However, when the 5-star army suddenly retreated and fled, they were caught off guard. Although there were less than 1,000 of them, Bota, who had fought with them for several days, did not underestimate them. In his opinion, the 5-star army was extremely difficult to deal with, as if they were made of iron. However, he did not expect that the bitter battle that he had imagined would not happen. Instead, the enemy had fled. After a moment of hesitation, Boda's face lit up with joy. Ah, did you see that? The 5-star army is also human. They can run away too. Charge. Catch up with them and kill them. Let them know that the sabers in our hands can easily chop off the head of any enemy. The 5-star army's cavalry had always been determined to fight to the last man no matter what kind of battle they faced. This was different from the battle Boda had imagined. He had always thought that a cavalry battle was a battle of one's fighting spirit. As long as one side suffered too many losses, their fighting spirit would collapse. At that time, it would be time for the victorious side to reap the fruits of their labor. This kind of rule was not practical for the 5-star army. There was no such thing as their fighting spirit collapsing. They would always fight to the last man. Every time he took a step forward, he had to pay a heavy price. But now the 5-star army had finally fled. At this moment, Boda felt a sense of relief. This was how cavalry should behave. The 5-star army had returned to normal. Boda was overjoyed and shouted loudly as he led the 10,000 cavalry to charge forward. If it was said that the 5-star army that dared to face him head-on would still make him somewhat fearful, then the 5-star army that had lost their morale and only cared about fleeing was simply not worth his attention. He only needed to charge forward and slaughter them. At this point, the outcome of the battle seemed to have been decided. Boda could not help showing a victorious look on his face. Although he had paid a price this time, he had killed at least 7,000 of the 5-star army's cavalrymen. This kind of achievement was enough to make him proud. Everyone else had been defeated by the 5-star army, but he was the only one who had killed so many members of the 5-star army and even chased after them. Wouldn't that make him the most powerful person? When he thought about how many people would look at him in a new light after this battle, the smug look on his face became more and more intense. He seemed to have already seen countless silvers and the best official position waiting for him. Under Boda's command, the 10,000 cavalrymen's morale soared and they charged even faster. They were getting closer and closer to the 5-star army, which was less than 1,000 soldiers. 1.5 miles, 1 mile. Less than 300 meters. Just as they were about to charge forward and kill to their heart's content, Kulu and the rest of the 1st Cavalry Division finally charged out of the canyon. When they walked out of Bo Tian Mound, they saw the new army's main cavalry formation with their bows drawn. Commander. When Kulu saw Commander Su He, who was standing in front of the middle corps, his tears flowed out involuntarily. He did not cry when the 2nd Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry when the 3rd Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry when the 4th Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry even when he knew that he was going to die in battle. But now, at the moment when he saw Su He after the war, he couldn't stop his tears from flowing out. Su He's eyes were red as well. When he saw that the 1st Cavalry Division was left with less than 1,000 cavalrymen, he knew how tragic the battle was. So many good soldiers had died just like that. As the commander, he naturally felt terrible. However, he knew that this was not the time to reminisce about the past. It was the time for revenge. Commander Ku, quickly go and rest. The military's medical center is already prepared. You are all meritorious soldiers. You must persevere and survive. Now watch us take revenge for all of you. In this battle, the 1st Cavalry Division had perfectly executed their plan to lure the enemy in. They had been leading the enemy by the nose. Although the losses were not small in the end, it was worth it no matter how one looked at it. Kulu had made a wrong decision before and caused Kulu to lose the position of commander. Now that he had made a great contribution, he should be the first choice when there was an empty position next time. Kulu was indeed exhausted. With such a big burden on his shoulders, he basically hadn't rested for the past few days. In addition to the injuries on his body, although they weren't fatal, if he didn't want to leave any sequelae, a good rest was necessary. He nodded and said, "All right, your subordinate will take his leave." Kulu left, but the real battle had only just begun. Following closely behind the 1st Cavalry Division was Bota and his 10,000 Kazakh cavalrymen. After turning a corner, they finally saw the exit of Botyan Mound. Just as the army was thinking about how they could finally go all out, they were greeted by Chong Bo of the 4th Cavalry Division of the 3rd Cavalry Division, which had over 8,000 cavalrymen and archers ready to shoot their arrows at any moment. They had been running back and forth for the past few days. In order to make the enemy think that they had really fled, the 4th Cavalry Division had no choice but to leave with the main force. Now that they were finally back, Chong Bo was envious of the 1st Cavalry Division's achievements. When it was time for him to perform, he would not be polite. He shouted, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" This shout echoed countless times when it hit the huge rock at the entrance of the canyon. This shout made the 4th Cavalry Division's 5-star Army's archers' eyes spit fire. Their killing intent filled the sky. With this shout, the soldiers of the 4th Cavalry Division loosened their right arms. Immediately, countless arrows shot out from their hands, creating many pleasant whooshing sounds. A dense rain of arrows pierced through the air and smashed into the unprepared Kazakh cavalry. Soon the sound of soldiers falling off their horses could be heard. From time to time, it was accompanied by cries of pain and alarm. 2 waves of arrows were released. More than 16,000 arrows were shot from afar, like a giant blade falling from the sky. 30% of the Kazakh cavalry vanguard was cut down. Unfortunately, Bota, the general, was also in the range of the arrows. When he turned the corner, he saw countless archers waiting for him. When he saw the neat formation of the 5-star Army soldiers, he knew that something was wrong. However, his opponent did not give him any chance to catch his breath or react. The arrows came at him as if they were free. He only swung his saber to cut down 3 arrows. Then the 4th arrow hit him in the chest, followed by the 5th, 6th and 7th arrows. In a short period of time, he fell to the ground like a porcupine. Even until the moment of his death, he still did not understand where the 5-star Army had come from. Also, since the 5-star Army had so many brave soldiers, why were they in such a sorry state when they were chased by him? Was it really that fun to tease him? With the death of Bota, the Kazakh vanguard cavalrymen who had lost their commander and were heavily injured by the arrows immediately turned around and fled like headless flies. Their faces changed drastically, and they were no longer as high-spirited and complacent as they were when they came out of the canyon. Kill. The 2nd Cavalry Division's division commander Bai Kai and the 3rd Cavalry Division's division commander Lei Chuandang, who had been waiting by the side, roared. More than 10,000 cavalrymen charged into the canyon. The 2 cavalry divisions that had been holding back finally had a chance to use their skills. At this time, they could not wait to charge into the enemy's cavalrymen. They waved their sabers and killed in all directions. One chased while the other fled. In just a short period of time, everyone had changed their roles. The only difference was that the Kazakh cavalrymen were really fleeing. Moreover, they were fleeing with a goal in mind. They thought that once they could meet up with the main force, they could change the situation of being chased by the enemy. However, they did not know that the current situation of the main force was not much better than theirs. In fact, it was even worse. When the agreed time of attack arrived, Yang Qindong, who had been hiding above the canyon, gave the order to attack. It was above the canyon that Yang Qindong saw the bravery of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division with his own eyes. However, he did not move. This was not because Yang Qindong was cold-blooded. Instead, it was because he knew that impatience in small matters would spoil great plans. If they attacked now, they could help the 1st Cavalry Division suppress the enemy. However, before the 1st Cavalry Division was in position and sealed off the enemy's escape route, doing so would only cause the Kazakh cavalrymen to become vigilant. If that happened, the plan of cutting off the enemy's head, waist, and tail would be ruined. This was something that Yang Qindong absolutely could not allow to happen. He could only watch all of this happen and hope that the 1st Cavalry Division could survive this cruel and bloody battle. Fortunately, the 1st Cavalry Division was 16 hours ahead of schedule. This gave the 1st Cavalry Division a ray of hope. Although the losses were disastrous, there were still close to 1,000 cavalrymen who survived. With these 1,000 cavalrymen as the backbone, presumably the day when the 1st Cavalry Division was reorganized and restored to fighting strength would not be too far away. Seeing his own soldiers being bullied, Yang Qindong could finally retaliate. How could he be polite? Under his orders, the rocks piled up above the canyon tumbled down, disrupting the Kazakh army's formation. Then 10,000 guns were fired. Under the muzzles of the 3 cold vanguard divisions, bullets flew out. The enemy cavalrymen were like living targets, becoming targets. In an instant, they were shot into a hornet's nest. One by one, they fell from their horses. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.